Marvel, I inherited the Shadow Realm. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26. Experiment successfully. Tony asked Reed to continue recording the research data. He left the laboratory and returned to the living room to consider who to choose for their human experiment. Although human experiments have risks, the benefits are still considerable. He doesn't want to use a stranger for the experiment. If the experiment is successful, but he can't use it for himself, then he will lose a lot. Therefore, the first point of the experimental candidate is that he must be loyal enough to him. With this restriction, the number of candidates he can choose is much smaller, or even very few. After careful thinking, a candidate soon appeared in his mind. Happy, the bodyguard of his predecessor. He has followed his predecessor for more than 10 years. His loyalty is unquestionable and his ability is also good. However, after he came back, in order to prevent him from being exposed at the beginning, he sent him to the company. Otherwise, according to the habit of his predecessor, he would take Happy with him wherever he went. Jarvis, help me connect Happy's phone. Okay, sir. Jarvis's voice was as calm as ever. Hello, boss. Happy's voice rang. Come to the villa. I need you to do something. Okay, boss, I'll be there. Happy said excitedly. As soon as Tony came back, he sent him to the company to be the security director. This is a good position for ordinary people. But for Happy, he was exiled, so he couldn't eat or sleep well during this period. Today, he received Tony's call again. He was depressed for a long time, as if he had been injected with chicken blood, and he was instantly revived. Without hesitation, after hanging up the phone, he dropped everything in his hands and rushed to the villa as fast as possible. 20 minutes later, Happy, who was speeding all the way, arrived at the door of the villa. Ding dong. The doorbell rang, and the door of the villa opened instantly. Happy came to the living room familiarly and saw Tony sitting on the sofa, and his face suddenly showed excitement. Boss, I thought you forgot about me. As he spoke, Happy had a tendency to cry faintly, and he was so wronged. Seeing this, Tony felt a chill in his heart. Hey, Happy, stop, I have something to tell you. I have an experimental project that needs your help. There are certain risks. Are you willing? In order to divert Happy's attention, Tony quickly got to the point. He didn't want to play the brotherly love game with a grown man. It was too disgusting. No problem, boss, you tell me. I can participate in the experiment now. Happy didn't hesitate. For him, as long as it was Tony's order, he would not refute it. He believed in Tony. Seeing him agree so decisively, Tony was also relieved, but he still reminded him. This is a human experiment. Although the success rate is high, it is not 100%. No one knows whether there will be accidents. You can think about it again. Don't think about it. If there is an accident, I will accept it. Boss, when will it start? Looking at Happy, who was more anxious than himself, Tony's mouth twitched, and it was not easy to continue persuading him. He waved his hand and said, come with me. After that, he took him directly into the underground laboratory. In the laboratory, Reed looked at Tony, who came back, and Happy, who followed him, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Boss, you're not going to start the human experiment right now, are you? Isn't it too soon? I think we can wait a little longer, so that I can accumulate more experimental materials, Reed advised. Tony shook his head directly. No need, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Let's get started. After saying that, Tony pushed Happy. He was a little fat, and he immediately looked at Reed with a serious face and said, I'm ready, let's get started. He looked very brave and fearless, but the premise was to ignore his trembling legs. After all, it was a matter of his life, and he couldn't be indifferent no matter what. But again, he believed in Tony. And Tony was not joking with his life. The reason why he started the human experiment directly was because he was sure, even if the experiment failed, he could save Happy. Don't forget, he has obtained the power of the horse charm, and even if an accident really happened, he can directly heal Happy. It is precisely because of the horse charm that the experiment looks full of risks, but in fact there is no risk at all. Naturally, he is unwilling to continue wasting time, so he plans to start the human experiment directly. Success makes everyone happy, and even if they fail, they can start over. Seeing that Tony and Happy both had the same attitude, Reed shrugged helplessly. Okay, you're the boss, you have the final say. He agreed directly, and began to prepare for the human experiment. Anyway, it didn't matter to him, since it wasn't him lying on the experimental table. There is actually no difference between human experiments and experiments with mice. The only difference is that human experiments require some safety measures to ensure the safety of the experimental subjects, but mice don't. Although Tony's laboratory is small, it has everything, and all the equipment is ready, so half an hour later, Reed had prepared everything. Taking off his clothes, Happy lay in the experimental cabin. Because he was nervous, he kept adjusting his breathing. Soon, Reed's voice came from outside. Are you ready? I'm going to start. If you regret it, it's not too late now. Let's start. Don't worry, I'm ready. After responding, Happy closed his eyes, a little afraid to look. Reed heard this, and immediately controlled the instrument to inject the purified Hulk blood into Happy's body. Tony, who was watching this scene, also became nervous. Although he could ensure Happy's safety, he didn't know whether the experiment would succeed, so his mood fluctuated as Happy injected the Hulk's blood. 5 minutes after the injection, everything was calm and Happy showed no abnormality. 10 minutes after the injection, Happy's skin began to turn red, like braised prawns. 20 minutes after the injection, his veins were thick and blood vessels formed a terrifying pattern on the surface of his skin, which was hideous and terrifying. Ayo. The intense pain made Happy scream, and the beast-like howl made Tony and Reed look serious. So far, all the reactions were within Reed's expectations. So although he looked serious, he did nothing. Time passed little by little. Happy's heart began to beat faster, blood flow accelerated, and circles of muscles began to bulge on his body. 1 hour, 2 hours, the out of control scene did not appear, and the experiment went smoothly as expected. 3 hours later, the test chamber was opened, and a muscular man, 2.5 meters tall, walked out of the chamber. The experiment was a success. Chapter 27, Kill them all when they come. Looking at Happy, Reed's eyes were shining like a man seeing a beautiful woman, and he kept looking at Happy, which made Happy feel uncomfortable. However, this slight discomfort at the moment could not compare with the joy in his heart. After the strengthening was completed, he could clearly feel his strength improvement. Terrifying power, extreme speed, unparalleled perception ability, and a body as hard as iron. Although he had not been tested, he felt that his current physical strength would be unscathed, even if he was hit by a large caliber sniper rifle. Just when he was wondering if it was an illusion, a gunshot suddenly rang out. Bang! The loud noise echoed in the laboratory, and Reed was startled, while Happy only felt a slight pain in his chest, just like a mosquito bite. At that moment, the two turned their heads and looked at the place where the sound came from. They saw Tony holding a modified pistol in his hand, and smoke was still coming out of the muzzle. It was obviously him who fired the gun just now. Yes, apart from anything else, this defense is a qualified meat shield. Hearing this, Reed suddenly came back to his senses and said with a twitch of his mouth, "Boss, I think you should be careful. What if the enhancement does not achieve the desired effect and kills someone?" Hearing this, Tony waved his hand. "As long as they are not dead, I can save them. It's okay." Mastering the power of the horse spell is so arrogant. As for Happy, he didn't have too many thoughts, but after hearing Tony's praise, he grinned directly. "Boss, don't worry, I will be your meat shield in the future." Hearing this, Tony hasn't said anything yet, but Reed on the side has already shaken his head speechlessly. These two people are as smart as a monkey and as stupid as a bear. He has nothing to say. "Okay, you will continue to be my personal bodyguard in the future," Tony responded, and Happy immediately touched his head and smiled foolishly. Ignoring him, Tony turned to Reed and said, "Try to get more of this kind of enhancer. I'm going to throw this guy out later." "Why?" Reed was a little confused. Keeping this guy means a constant supply of enhancers. Why throw him away? and this guy is a very good research material. He has many ideas to experiment with. In this regard, Tony shook his head without explaining. Reed didn't know where this guy came from. He knew that he had intercepted it from the military. It should be fine to keep it in his hands for a short time, but it will definitely be discovered after a long time. By then, Bruce will be a constant source of trouble, and he doesn't want to cause that pile of trouble. Besides, even if there is no trouble from the outside world, this guy himself is a time bomb. Leaving him here, he has to guard against him day and night. Otherwise, if this guy accidentally wakes up, it will be a lot of fun. Although according to his request, Reed will inject him with a large amount of anesthetic every day to ensure that this guy is always in a coma. But it's better to be safe than sorry. The anesthetic can't suppress him forever, so it's better to get rid of this guy as soon as possible. Anyway, we have obtained all the benefits that can be obtained from this guy. We can't really expect to create an army of extraordinary people with his blood. That's too crazy, mainly because Tony can't find so many suitable candidates. After arranging things, Tony took Happy out of the basement. At this moment, the sky outside had completely darkened. They stayed in the underground laboratory for almost 5 hours, and it would be midnight in another 2 hours. Stretching, Tony looked at Happy, who had changed a lot, and said casually, "Stay here tonight. Find a room by yourself." "Okay, boss, I know." Happy responded, and Tony didn't care about him, and walked straight to the room on the second floor. After working so hard for so many days, he was also very tired and needed a good rest. However, tonight is destined to be a sleepless night. As soon as he returned to the room, Jarvis' voice suddenly rang. "Sir, a large number of unknown armed forces are detected approaching the villa. Please make preparations early." As soon as he finished speaking, the sleepiness on his face disappeared instantly, and his eyes looked out the window sharply. However, under the cover of darkness, he saw nothing. "Turn up the surveillance around the villa and project it onto the wall." As soon as he finished speaking, Jarvis immediately projected the scene of the surveillance outside. In the picture, a large number of armed men in black clothes were approaching the villa quickly. All of them were fully equipped and holding guns. They were armed to the teeth. Looking at them, Tony frowned instantly and guessed the identity of these people. The Ten Rings Gang. Impossible. Looking at their equipment, they are all the most advanced weapons and equipment in the world, and the Ten Rings Gang does not have these things. Apart from the Ten Rings Gang, he did not offend any forces when he returned to New York. Could it be him? Suddenly, the figure of Bruce flashed in Tony's mind. If you want to say what the biggest trouble around him is, Bruce is undoubtedly ranked first. Although he took him away in an alley, he was sure that there was no surveillance around. But if you are careful, you can still find that you took Bruce away. After all, Bruce disappeared in the direction where he appeared, which was a coincidence. But according to his calculations, even if the military noticed him, it would not be now. So someone must have seen him take Bruce away, so they came to him so quickly. And the one who could notice this at the first time must be the force that has been monitoring him. There are not many forces in New York that can monitor his actions at any time. Kingpin is one, and the military is another, but neither of them has any reason to monitor him. In addition to these two major forces, there is one left, SHIELD. Thinking about Natasha, who appeared in the company, SHIELD may have started to monitor him after he returned to New York. Thinking of this, Tony raised his eyebrows immediately, not knowing where he was exposed. It's a long story, but in just a moment, Tony connected all the things in his mind. Although he has no evidence, he is 80% sure that those people outside are definitely from SHIELD, and there may even be people from the military involved. Go, kill them all. Tony said coldly. Although he guessed the identity of the person who came, he had no intention of showing mercy. When he first crossed over, he was not strong enough, so he wanted to hide himself. But now, he has the people and the strength, and the giant Stark Industries is standing behind him. Whoever wants to cause trouble for him, he will knock off his claws first. Not to mention that the current shield is not the shield that will cover the sky with one hand in the future. Since they dare to set their sights on him, don't blame me for being ruthless. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28, A Great Shame and Humiliation. As Tony's voice fell, a black shadow flowed on the ground and rushed out of the villa. Jill is a level 6 agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., an elite among the elite. He has carried out many missions to assassinate enemy dignitaries without fail. Now he is only one level away from the high-level level 7 agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So after the mission was issued, he took the initiative to apply for this operation, just to accumulate more credits and be promoted to the top faster. Although the target they want to arrest this time is Tony, who is famous in New York, he is not worried at all. With so many elite agents working together, let alone a playboy, even the head of the United States can be captured. So, in his opinion, this mission is completely a free credit. With a relaxed mentality, Jill quickly approached Tony's villa. He had already planned the route of action. I will break into the window directly later, and then say, "You are arrested." It must be very exciting. Thinking of this in his heart, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he seemed to have seen the merit waving to him. Soon, he came to the outskirts of the villa. Just as he was about to enter, a shadow suddenly blocked the light behind him. "What is that?" Jill muttered in confusion, and subconsciously turned his head to look behind him. Suddenly, a figure wrapped in a black robe with sharp hands and feet appeared in front of him. "Who are you?" Jill asked quickly, and at the same time, he wanted to turn the gun and aim at the figure. As an elite agent, he believed that he could subdue him before the other party reacted. But soon, he found something wrong. Why did he fly? And why did his hands and feet not obey him? Was he poisoned? He was full of doubts in his heart. As his eyes moved from high to low, a familiar figure suddenly came into his sight. Who is this? It feels so familiar. Where is his head? Why is there only a body left? A series of doubts kept emerging, but soon, he realized that the headless body seemed to be himself. No wonder it looked so familiar. As soon as he thought of this, his consciousness suddenly fell into darkness. It's a long story, but it all happened in an instant. When Jill approached the villa, the Thornblade ninjas who received the order had already launched an attack. The sharp claws drew an arc in the air and directly beheaded him, but the Thornblade ninjas were too fast and the claws were too sharp, so he didn't feel any pain at all. He didn't wake up until his head fell to the ground. He was dead. The scene here was just a microcosm at the moment. With the attack of the Thornblade army, more than half of the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. had been killed before they even approached the villa. The elusive Thornblade army brought the art of assassination to the extreme. Most of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents didn't even have time to react before they died. But the elite are elites after all. After more than half of the number of people were lost, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents also reacted. At that moment, they no longer cared about hiding their whereabouts and reminded the people around them. After being reminded, the difficulty of assassination by the Thornblade army was greatly increased, but as a branch of the army born for combat, assassination was only one of the methods they chose to complete the mission, not the only choice. Seeing that the assassination plan was blocked, the Thornblade Corps decisively changed the combat plan and faced the enemy head-on. One after another, black figures slowly walked out of the darkness outside the villa, with skull eyes exuding amazing murderous intent, staring at the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Under the gaze of the Thornblade Corps, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, who are known as elite, only felt an inexplicable fear rising in their hearts. They have always claimed to be fearless, but now facing the Dark Army, the whole person seems to have fallen into hell, with cold bodies, trembling hands and feet, and their strength is directly suppressed by 2 levels. As dark creatures, their existence is to bring fear to people, especially for ordinary people. The dark aura they exude is enough to make them lose all resistance. And the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. can still maintain a certain combat effectiveness, which is worthy of the title of elite. However, even if they still have a certain combat effectiveness, it is useless at this moment. When the encirclement was completed, the Thornblade Corps directly launched an attack. The speed of each Thornblade ninja is comparable to that of a cheetah. Under the full force attack, the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. are like lambs to be slaughtered and can only wait for the arrival of the god of death. It's not that they didn't resist. At the moment when the Thornblade army launched the attack, all the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. had subconsciously opened fire. In the dark night, fierce gunshots continued to sound, and many Thornblade ninjas were unable to dodge and were directly shot into black mist. But all this is of no avail. As immortal dark creatures, as long as the Shadow Kingdom is not destroyed, they can be reborn in the Shadow Kingdom continuously. So after fighting for a long time, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. finally found that the enemy not only did not decrease at all, but became more and more. This scene completely destroyed the will of S.H.I.E.L.D. to resist. The gunshots, which were originally quite dense, quickly became sparse, and many people began to look for opportunities to escape. After all, work is public, life is your own, except for a few people. More people care more about their own lives. So, after discovering that they could not eliminate the Thornblade ninjas at all, a large number of people chose to escape. As this part of the people gave up resistance, they were already weak in resistance and completely fell into the abyss of despair. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who held on to their original positions were beheaded one after another. Those who took the opportunity to escape were also hunted down by the Thorn Legion one by one. Soon, the periphery of Tony's villa became a bloody slaughterhouse, with blood and flesh everywhere. The strong smell of blood filled the air, making people want to vomit. 1 kilometer away, at the temporary command post of S.H.I.E.L.D., Pierce looked at the scene displayed on the surveillance screen. His face turned extremely livid, as ugly as it could be. Not only him, but also other people in the command room were stunned at this moment. They had expected that the action might not go smoothly, but they never thought that their S.H.I.E.L.D. elites would be directly wiped out. That was not 1 or 2 people, but hundreds of people. With the loss of this group of elites, it can be foreseen that the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. will inevitably decline in a short period of time. Can anyone tell me what's going on? Our S.H.I.E.L.D's carefully selected elite were wiped out. This is a shame. This is a shame. Pierce kept drawing, and the distress on his face was not fake at all. Although he was an undercover agent of Hydra, he was also the highest commander of S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D's loss was his loss. How could he stay calm? Chapter 29. Is this guy still human? Seeing Pierce's face full of anger, many S.H.I.E.L.D. members present did not dare to speak, fearing that they would become punching bags by accident. Seeing that everyone was silent, Pierce took a deep breath and forced himself to suppress the anger in his heart. Go, send the Mech Warriors to the field. No matter what those guys are, tear them apart. Yes. Everyone responded loudly and quickly got busy. Soon, a heavy sound of footsteps echoed in the night, and a figure as tall as 5 meters slowly walked towards Tony's villa. Every step it took was a tremor on the ground. It was the Mech Warrior that S.H.I.E.L.D. had been secretly developing. Originally, Pierce did not want to bring out the Mech Warrior, and the reason he brought it was just to be on the safe side, but it just came in handy at this moment. The Mech Warrior, remotely controlled by members of S.H.I.E.L.D., was 5 meters and 6 meters tall, and weighed 6 tons. Although it was huge, its speed was not slow at all. With its unparalleled defense and abnormal strength, the Mech Warrior is the undisputed overlord on land. Tank armor is like a child's toy in front of him, and he can tear it apart at will. Soon, the Mech Warrior came to the periphery of the villa under the control of the S.H.I.E.L.D. members. Shadows emerged from the ground, and the Blade Corps was dispatched again. Compared with the 5-meter tall Mech Warrior, the Blade Corps was like a child in front of it. But as dark creatures, they don't know what fear is. They only know that anyone who trespasses into the villa will die. Whoosh, whoosh. A burst of air-breaking sound rang out, and the Blade Corps launched an attack. The sharp claws instantly fell on the Mech Warrior's body, bringing a burst of sparks. Such an attack is not painful for the Mech Warrior. A small rocket appeared on his arm, and the next second, the rocket was launched, and fell into the Blade Corps. Boom. A terrifying explosion sounded, and endless flames dispelled the darkness, turning the sky red. A large number of Blade Ninjas were vaporized in the explosion. The place that was originally full of Blade Ninjas was directly cleared. In the command post, watching this scene, the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. were excited, sweeping away the decadence just now. In the villa, Tony was also observing the situation on the battlefield through the surveillance projected by Jarvis. After seeing the performance of the Mech Warrior, Tony immediately raised his eyebrows. Interesting. It seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. is still a bit capable, and it has developed such a war weapon. I just don't know who is stronger between this Mecha and Happy. While muttering in his heart, Tony's mouth showed a playful smile. Happy. Boss, I'm here. What's wrong? A sound of footsteps came from outside the door, and soon, Happy's tall figure appeared in the room. Because the villa is well soundproofed, although the sky has been overturned outside, no movement can be heard in the villa, so Happy still knows nothing about the situation outside. Come and see. I want you to fight this iron lump one-on-one. What do you think? Tony said as he stretched out his hand to let him in. Happy, who entered the room, also saw the projection on the wall. No problem, boss, leave it to me. I'll go and tear it down now. Looking at the picture projected by Jarvis, Happy instantly became excited. Having just obtained the power of Superman, he was eager to show it at this moment, so he was not afraid of Tony's arrangement at all, but full of expectations. Since you are so confident, then go ahead. I'm waiting to see your performance. Don't worry, boss, I will definitely twist the head of that iron lump off. After saying that, Happy strode out of the villa. At this time, in the battlefield outside, the battle between the Blade Corps and the Mech Warriors continued. Although the Blade Ninja could not break the defense, it also fought back and forth with the Mech Warriors with its immortal characteristics. However, when Happy came to the battlefield, the Blade Corps, which had been attacking continuously, suddenly stopped its actions, and then sank into the darkness one by one and disappeared. This was naturally Tony's order. He wanted to see whether Happy, who had been injected with the Hulk enhancer, was stronger or the secret weapon of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Mech Warrior. Hey, big guy, your opponent is me now. Happy challenged the Mech Warrior and even hooked his finger, as if he didn't take it seriously at all. As a pure war machine, the Mech Warrior naturally had no feelings, but the S.H.I.E.L.D. member who controlled him did. Through the eyes of the Mech Warrior, the member who controlled the Mech Warrior clearly witnessed Happy's provocation. Suddenly, the Mech operator shouted and cursed, and controlled the Mech Warrior to walk directly towards Happy, wanting to make this arrogant guy pay the price. Seeing the Mech Warrior approaching, Happy's face became serious. Ha! With a loud shout, Happy's muscles suddenly bulged and punched the Mech Warrior. Flesh and blood versus steel. Theoretically, it is completely an egg hitting a stone. But after Happy, who had been injected with the Hulk enhancer, punched the Mech Warrior, a sound of metal clashing suddenly rang out in the air. The giant Mech Warrior was even knocked back by Happy's punch. Such a scene immediately shocked everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. Is this guy still human? He knocked back the Mech Warrior with one punch. It weighs 6 tons, plus the Mech Warrior's own strength. In order to knock it back with one punch, it means that Happy's explosive power just now is at least more than 15 tons. How is this possible? Everyone stared at the scene on the battlefield in amazement. Only a few noticed that cracks had appeared on the Mech Warrior where Happy hit him. In other words, the Mech Warrior that can withstand the frontal bombardment of the shells may not be able to withstand Happy's fist. With this thought, many people in S.H.I.E.L.D. felt their scalps tingling. Use rockets to blow up this monster. Pierce's roar resounded through the command post again. After receiving the order, the Mech operator quickly operated with sweat on his forehead. Suddenly, a hole appeared on the chest of the Mech Warrior, and a medium-sized rocket appeared. Its power was several times that of a small rocket. Whoosh! The rocket flew out with a tail flame and hit Happy head-on. Before he could react, boom, boom, boom. An explosion several times more violent than before appeared. Happy was instantly engulfed in flames. Hit it, hit it. In the command post, the Mech operator shouted excitedly, and the others cheered as well. But soon, everyone's cheers stopped abruptly, and a dark figure slowly walked out of the flames, standing firmly in place. Looking at this scene, a sense of fear instantly appeared in the hearts of all members of SHIELD. Is this guy really still human? Chapter 30 I'm your father's friend. Happy walked out of the flames with a firm step and excited eyes. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face, and his big white teeth were directly exposed to the air, which was extremely conspicuous. That's enough, come again. After saying that, Happy took the initiative to rush towards the Mech Warrior. A series of roars sounded again. Happy, excited, waved his fists and blasted the Mech Warrior. Under his terrifying strange power, the shell of the Mech Warrior changed for a while and soon became bumpy, giving people a feeling that it could fall apart at any time. In the command post, a depressing atmosphere enveloped everyone present at this moment. Everyone looked at the Mecha Warrior being blasted by Happy in the picture and couldn't help but feel a little frightened, fearing that the Mecha Warrior would fall apart directly in the next moment. What should we do now? Pierce's voice sounded, pulling everyone's attention back from the picture. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. They didn't know what to do. They even used their secret weapons, but they couldn't even get close to the villa. What can they do? They can't let them go by themselves with guns. Thinking of the scene of the Mecha Warrior being beaten, everyone shuddered involuntarily. At the same time, they made up their minds not to get close to the villa. Seeing that everyone was like a mute, Pierce rarely did not get angry. After all, even he was a little scared, let alone these people. However, the action has already begun, and it can't end in a whimper. So, after scanning the crowd, Pierce quickly focused on Nick Fury. Nick, do you have any ideas? Pierce called out the name directly. Nick was a little surprised when he was called, but he didn't have the fear of the others. Therefore, after reacting, Nick quickly organized his thoughts and said, I think we have got the priorities wrong. Our target this time is Tony and Bruce he took away, not a fight with that big guy. Since the Mecha Warrior can't break through the blockade of the big guy, let him entangle the big guy. We sneak into the villa from another place and arrest Tony. According to intelligence, the big guy is Tony's personal bodyguard. Now that he is here, it means that the security forces around Tony are very weak. As long as we act fast enough, after taking down Tony, this big guy will have to raise his hands and surrender. Listening to Nick's analysis, everyone present nodded one after another, but Pierce frowned at this moment. Don't forget the group of monsters just now. Even without the protection of that stupid big guy, there are still those elusive monsters. Hearing this, Nick smiled confidently and said, of course I haven't forgotten their existence. But through my observation just now, I found that, although the monsters are very strong, their defense is also weak. They will also disappear after hitting the vital points. As long as we prepare in advance and don't get caught off guard, it's not difficult to deal with them. Hearing this, Pierce pondered for a while and finally nodded and said, what you said makes sense. In this case, you can select a group of elites and military personnel to sneak in together. I'll help you attract attention here. Pierce approved Nick's plan and threw this task to him. Suddenly, Nick's mouth twitched and his eyes looking at Pierce became a little resentful. Don't think that what he said just now is very reasonable, but it's just talk on paper. No one knows whether Tony still has any killer tricks hidden. Just like Happy, according to the information, he is just an ordinary bodyguard, but look at the scene, where he is pressing the Mecha Warrior to the ground and hammering him. How can he be ordinary? Director, I think we can discuss the selection of the action personnel. Nick tried to rescue him, but before he finished speaking, Pierce had turned his head and looked at the screen with an expression of I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen. Seeing this, Nick sighed helplessly and could only leave the command post to select the action personnel. And just after Nick left, Pierce also edited a text message on his mobile phone and sent it out. There is an old saying in China called the mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole is behind. And he will be the oriole today. Let Nick lead people to explore the way with the military first and then arrange people to follow them to prepare to pick peaches. The plan is perfect, now it depends on the implementation. At the gate of Tony's villa, Happy and the Mecha Warrior are still fighting, but with the previous lesson, whenever Happy sees the Mecha Warrior open, he will quickly dodge. Although he can withstand artillery shells, he is not used to being bombed. On the other side, after selecting a team of elite members, Nick quickly joined forces with the elite team sent by General Ross to sneak in from the back of the villa. Speaking of this, we have to talk about the layout of Tony's villa. His villa is completely built on the edge of a cliff, with the main door facing the land and the balcony facing the sea. Therefore, when the predecessor installed the surveillance, he did not consider the place facing the sea at all. After all, there is a cliff as high as tens of meters below, who can climb up from under the cliff. Therefore, this place has become a surveillance blind spot, and Jarvis cannot detect it at all. Nick, who has carefully studied the layout of the villa, naturally noticed this surveillance blind spot. Therefore, he directly chose this place as the entry point. Of course, he didn't want to climb the cliff in the dark, so he mobilized a silent helicopter. A group of people sat in the helicopter, circled around and arrived above the balcony of Tony's villa, and landed on the balcony through a rappelling rope. Tony, who was watching the show in the room on the second floor, didn't know that a group of uninvited guests had broken into his house at this moment. Without making any noise, Nick and the others saw the heat source on the second floor through thermal imaging, so they went straight to the second floor. Just after they stepped onto the second floor, Tony, who was watching Happy fighting the Mecha Warriors with great interest in the room, suddenly received a reminder from Jarvis. "Sir, there are guests in the villa. They are now on the second floor, and will be in your room soon." Hearing this, Tony was stunned. Where did they come in? Even you didn't notice it? According to the detection, they should have bypassed the surveillance area outside the villa, and came in from the balcony. Just as one person and one intelligence were talking, suddenly, there was a loud noise, and the door of the room was kicked open. Nick led two fully armed teams and quickly rushed into the room, with black guns aimed directly at all the vital parts of his body. "Good evening, Mr. Tony. It's really difficult to meet you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nick Fury, an old friend of your father. Now we have a case that we need you to go back with us to investigate. Please don't do any dangerous actions, otherwise, they will shoot directly." Nick looked at Tony with a smile on his face. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. His originally tense mind couldn't help but relax. Chapter 31, Bucky the Winter Soldier arrives. Seeing Nick's victorious attitude, Tony raised his eyebrows. "You are my father's friend? Then I really feel sad for him. You actually have a friend like you. In the middle of the night, you bring people to break into your friend's house and point a gun at your friend's son. Is this how you treat your friends, Mr. Nick?" Tony hit Nick without any hesitation, and the smile on Nick's face disappeared immediately. "Maybe you are right, but this is my job. Please cooperate. Don't expect others to save you. Just follow me now." After saying that, Nick signaled to a SHIELD member next to him, and the SHIELD member immediately nodded in understanding and was about to come forward to handcuff Tony. But before he could make any move, Tony stood up directly from the sofa, and the moment he stood up, the people who had been aiming their guns at him pulled the bolts one after another, and the conflict was about to break out. Nick was also frightened by Tony's action. He raised his hand to signal everyone not to be impulsive, and quickly said, "I warn you again, you stay there obediently and don't move, otherwise I won't guarantee your safety. Do you really think you can beat me?" Tony sneered. The next second black figures emerged from the ground and blocked Tony's way. Seeing this scene, Nick's pupils shrank, and he stopped stopping everyone, and even took the initiative to order, "Shoot." Suddenly, countless bullets formed a metal storm and swept towards Tony. The black shadow ninjas standing in front of Tony were torn apart by bullets and disappeared on the spot. However, a scene that Nick did not expect appeared. The black shadow ninjas disappeared quickly, but they appeared even faster. The black shadows on the ground seemed to be endless, and new black shadow ninjas kept appearing in front of Tony, building a human wall for him. Seeing this scene, Nick finally realized that things were not good. Before, he had always thought that the black shadow ninja was a person with special abilities that Tony had recruited from somewhere. After all, this world is full of strange things, and there are all kinds of people. However, watching these people risking their lives to block bullets for Tony, he finally realized that these people might not be people with special abilities. After all, people have survival instincts. Whenever their lives are threatened, few people will risk their lives for others. Not to mention that like now, when they know they will die, they continue to use their lives to block bullets for Tony. However, when he realized this, it was too late. Not only in front of Tony, but also around them, Thornblade ninjas continued to appear. Their claws cut through the air, and screams suddenly rang out in the crowd. Although they were still prepared before, when the time came, everyone still cared less about the consequences. Just as the battle in the room started, a figure slowly walked into the underground laboratory. Reed, who was recording data, heard the movement and immediately looked back. Looking at the strange figure in front of him, a trace of vigilance appeared on his face. "Who are you?" The man ignored him and looked at Bruce in the nutrition cabin. After confirming that he was the target of this trip, the man walked directly to the nutrition cabin. "Stop, don't move." Reed warned loudly and took out a gun from somewhere. But he obviously underestimated the horror of the man. Looking at him holding a gun, the man's figure flashed in an instant and appeared in front of Reed at a speed that was difficult to capture with the naked eye and punched him in the stomach. Suddenly, Reed's figure was like a cannonball and was blown away directly and smashed into a pile of experimental equipment. After doing all this, the man turned around and opened the nutrition cabin, took Bruce out of it, carried him on his back, and walked out. But he didn't notice that just after Bruce left the nutrition cabin, his eyelids trembled slightly. In order to keep Bruce asleep, in addition to the nutrient solution in the nutrition cabin, Tony also mixed a large amount of anesthetics to keep him asleep. Now leaving the nutrition cabin means that Bruce will wake up at any time. Walking out of the laboratory and into the living room, Tony, dressed in casual clothes, was sitting in the living room. Nick, covered in wounds, was lying at his feet. Tony looked at the guy coming out of the laboratory with a calm look, without any surprise. Jarvis's presence made every corner of the villa invisible to Tony's eyes. Nick, lying on the ground, was surprised when he saw the figure coming out of the laboratory. Bucky. Hearing this name, Tony couldn't help but take a closer look at the person. Bucky, whose full name is Bucky Bashan, is a good friend of Captain America. After being brainwashed by Hydra, he was transformed into the Winter Soldier. Interesting. SHIELD. The military, and now even you Hydra are involved. Today is really lively. Bucky looked at the two with an expressionless face, not at all flustered by his identity being exposed. Putting Bruce on his back aside, he slowly drew out a long knife from his back. The blade was as white as snow, flashing with cold light. Seeing this, Tony still sat on the sofa calmly, but a series of black figures appeared beside him. There are many superpowers in the Marvel world, but most of them are just stronger and faster. Such superpowers can be dealt with by the Shadow Core, so Tony naturally has no desire to move. Kill. With a light wave of his hand, the Thornblade ninja rushed towards Bucky in an instant, and Bucky, holding a long sword, also rushed forward. The two sides collided fiercely, and the sound of metal clashing resounded throughout the villa. Bucky's strength is very strong, and the long sword seems to come alive in his hands. One by one, the Thornblade ninja was beheaded by him. However, no matter how strong he is only one person. Unless he has absolutely overwhelming strength, he will be overwhelmed by the crowd of the Shadow Core sooner or later. Obviously, Bucky does not have absolutely overwhelming strength. Therefore, as time passed, Bucky was gradually overwhelmed by the Thornblade ninja. Tony was sitting on the sofa, watching the battle between the two sides with great interest, but at this moment, a muffled groan sounded. On the battlefield, this sound was barely audible, but Tony's face changed instantly. He then looked behind Bucky. He saw Bruce, who had just been left behind by Bucky, sitting up from the ground with his head covered with his hands. He was only wearing a pair of shorts, and there was a trace of confusion in his eyes. He looked around and saw the messy scene around him, and the confusion in his eyes became even worse. Soon, a headache suddenly hit, and a series of memory fragments kept flashing through his mind. He had mutated and was destroying the streets crazily. He escaped from the encirclement and came to the alley. A man in black knocked him out, and he was taken to a laboratory and his blood was drawn. Chapter 32. Bruce wakes up. Fragmented memory fragments kept emerging. Although Bruce didn't know the specific process, through the remaining memory fragments, he knew that he seemed to have become an experimental subject and was placed on the research table for experiment. Suddenly, a sense of anger rose in his heart. He had done human experiments before, but he was an operator, not an experimental subject. But now, he has become an experimental subject. A normal person can't stand it, let alone him who has a problem with his personality. Roar. A roar sounded. Everyone in the villa was attracted by him. Tony stood up from the sofa in an instant, and his face became serious. Bang bang bang. While roaring, Bruce pounded the ground frantically. His figure changed at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning green and becoming stronger. In a few breaths, the green fat man who ravaged Nile a few days ago returned to the eyes of the world again. After the transformation, Bruce was completely out of control. Anger dominated his body and made him start to destroy everything in front of him. The first one to be unlucky was Bucky, who was closest to the green fat man. A fist bigger than a sandbag was thrown out quickly, and before Bucky could react, he was blown away. Blood was spilled in the air, and Bucky was stunned by the punch. The angry green fat man, at this moment, still kept his pace, and rushed directly to the Thornblade Legion. The terrifying power and absolute defense made the human wave tactics of the Sharp Blade Legion a joke. The green fat man was seen rampaging in the crowd of the Thornblade Legion, just like the Tyrannosaurus Rex rampant in the Cretaceous period, extremely arrogant and invincible. Nick, who was lying at Tony's feet, watched this scene. His eyes kept twitching, and he swallowed his saliva subconsciously. He had seen many extraordinary people, but he had never seen a guy as powerful as the green fat man, especially the invincible arrogance, which made him tremble. Tony, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally couldn't sit still at this moment. If he continued to watch, his villa would be ruined. He still liked the current style of the villa, and didn't want to rebuild it. Bang! A ball of flame instantly appeared in his hand, and the flame burned out of thin air. The surrounding space began to distort slightly under the burning of the flame. "Hey, fatty!" Tony shouted, instantly attracting the attention of the green fat man. Suddenly, the flame in his hand flew out of his hand and flew towards the green fat man. Boom! The flame, which was originally only the size of a palm, suddenly broke out and instantly submerged the green fat man. His terrifying defense became as fragile as paper under the burning flame, and it broke as soon as it burned. Roar! A painful roar sounded, and the green fat man, who had just been showing his power, kept rolling on the ground. From the Overlord to the clown, the two sides were only one flame away. Nick looked at this scene, and immediately turned back to look at Tony. The expression on his face was as if he had seen a ghost, full of shock. What a joke! A playboy who is famous for dating girls is so powerful. The green fat man was killed in seconds. God, are you kidding me? A series of questions popped up in his mind, and Nick was completely numb. Compared with Nick's optimism, Tony didn't relax at all. What is the most frightening thing about the green fat? The unparalleled defense? Or the terrifying power? None of them. It's the unlimited growth. In the early stage, the green fat had a hard time fighting an army alone, but in the later stage, the green fat was not at all weak in confronting the gods head on. Such a terrifying improvement, except for the green fat, which other mutant can do it? So looking at the embarrassed green fat at the moment, Tony didn't dare to be careless, and was always on guard. Sure enough, although the flames continued to burn on the green fat, except for the painful howl, the green fat's voice was not weak at all. Even as time passed, it became more and more full of energy. Soon, the green fat stood up with flames all over his body, and his eyes full of anger fell on Tony. Bang! With a step, the floor of the villa collapsed instantly, and the green fat with flames on his body instantly came to Tony. The huge fist blasted out, and a roar came out in the air. Tony was about to be blown away by the green fat man, but Tony still stood there motionless. Bang! A trembling sound rang out, and a wall of fire appeared in front of Tony, blocking the green fat man's fist. The dragon spell gave Tony not only the burning of flames, but also a kind of flame rule. With the integration of the dragon spell, the flame is a toy in Tony's hand, allowing him to control it. The green fat man's power may be very strong, but he can't break the rules. Therefore, from Nick's perspective, the green fat man madly bombarded Tony, but was completely blocked by the wall of fire in front of Tony. Even Tony showed a smile at the corner of his mouth, looking at the angry green fat man calmly. Finally, Tony had enough fun, and the flames covered his right hand, watching the green fat man in front of him punch out. Boom. The green fat man's huge figure flew directly out, crashed out of the villa, and left a big hole in the wall. Falling on the ground outside the villa, the green fat man's figure shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the flames burning on his body were instantly extinguished, but he was punched back to his original form by Tony. Footsteps sounded slowly. Tony walked out of the cave, glanced at Bruce who was already unconscious, and then looked at Happy who was not far away. As if he noticed his gaze, Happy looked back and showed a simple smile on his face. Under his feet, the Mecha Warriors of S.H.I.E.L.D. had been dismantled into pieces and turned into a pile of parts. Boss. Happy walked quickly to Tony. Because of the previous battle, his clothes were already tattered. Those who didn't know would think that he had just begged back from the war zone. Pack up and send the people back to the basement, Tony said casually. Happy nodded, and then Tony walked out of the villa and quickly disappeared into the darkness. The atmosphere in the temporary command post was almost solidified at this moment. The actions failed one after another, leaving everyone at a loss as to what to do. For a moment, everyone turned to look at Pierce, waiting for him, the director, to make a decision. At this moment, around them, one after another, black shadow ninjas continued to appear. Seeing this, everyone was shocked and quickly gathered together. They had witnessed the horror of the Shadow Corps with their own eyes. How could they remain calm when facing this group of terrifying guys? Pierce was also shocked by the situation in front of him, but his psychological quality was obviously better. He immediately opened his mouth and shouted, "Tony, what do you want to do? We are from SYNOPSIS, affiliated with the US government. You are committing a crime by surrounding us now, you know." As he spoke, Pierce looked at the door, waiting for Tony to appear. At this moment, a sound of footsteps came from outside, and Tony walked into the temporary command post leisurely. Chapter 33, People get scared before they even start. Tony's appearance made everyone present feel relieved. They were afraid that Tony would really order them to be killed regardless of the consequences. Anyway, there was no evidence to prove that he did it. Therefore, Tony's appearance here meant that what they were worried about would not happen. "Nice to meet you. I'm Alexander Pierce, the director of SYLD." Pierce adjusted his clothes, took the initiative to step forward, and stated his identity. Looking at his outstretched hand, Tony asked with a smile, "You are the one who ordered them to come to my house to arrest people?" Upon hearing this, Pierce's eyelids twitched. Naturally, he could not admit this, and hurriedly said, "It's all a misunderstanding. We got the news that the Green Demon was hiding here, so we gathered people to encircle and suppress him. You also know that the appearance of the Green Demon a few days ago made the people of New York panic. We must give an explanation to the outside world. We didn't know that this was your residence." It must be said that Pierce is worthy of being a director. His lies on the spot are well founded and there is nothing wrong with them. Unfortunately, Tony was not here to reason with him. "Pa." A crisp slap sounded throughout the command post. Everyone was stunned by the scene before their eyes. Tony slapped the dignified director of SHIELD in public. Even Pierce was stunned. He had not expected Tony's action at all. A trace of anger flashed in his eyes, but disappeared in the blink of an eye. There was even a hint of smile on his face. "Are you relieved?" Seeing this, Tony looked at Pierce deeply. This guy is quite something. "No, how are you going to make me relieve my anger?" Tony said slowly, and moved his right palm by the way, giving people the illusion that he might slap him again at any time. "Pa." A loud slap sounded again. Don't get me wrong, it was not Tony who slapped him, but Pierce himself. Such a scene not only stunned everyone, but also Tony. He realized that the guy in front of him was not simple, but he didn't expect him to do such a thing as spitting in his own face. "Now, are you relieved?" Pierce asked with a smile again. Tony didn't answer the question, but just looked at him with interest. "Interesting. But you know what? The more you do this, the more I want to kill you. A barking dog may be annoying, but a poisonous snake in the dark is more terrifying." Hearing this, Pierce's breathing became a little faster. He felt the murderous intent emanating from Tony. But the more this happened, the more he dared not make any other moves. He could only continue to smile and said, "Mr. Tony, you are joking. Today's incident was originally our fault of SHIELD, and you were implicated. Don't worry, I will compensate you for all your losses. SHIELD will handle all the subsequent troubles. It won't cause you any trouble. I also hope you will show mercy and let us go." Pierce continued to admit his weakness, and the murderous intent in Tony's heart subsided. It's not that Tony intends to let this guy go, but his words touched Tony. Many people died tonight. If they are not dealt with, tomorrow will definitely be a huge trouble. Although Stark Industries behind Tony can also handle these troubles, it will cost human relationships and is very troublesome. So Pierce promised to solve Tony's troubles, and Tony was naturally happy about it. When a person has value, he has the right to live. Now, Pierce has won this qualification for himself. In addition to this reason, Tony let Pierce go for another reason. After all, he is the director of SHIELD, a senior official of the United States, and a senior member of Hydra. It is not the right time to kill him now. It seems that you are a man who knows the times. Then the matter tonight is handed over to you. I hope you can handle it well, otherwise. Tony did not continue to speak, but both parties knew what the consequences would be. At the moment, Pierce suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. After relaxing, he found that his shirt was soaked with cold sweat. Looking around at the SHIELD people in the command post, Tony turned and left. He came here just to knock on SHIELD, but he didn't expect Pierce to be so sensible that he was scared before he took action. Now that the matter is done, he will naturally not stay here any longer. After he left, the Black Shadow ninjas who were originally surrounding the SHIELD people also sank into the ground and disappeared. When the Black Shadow ninja disappeared, a series of gasps suddenly sounded in the hall. Everyone looked at the door in fear, their eyes full of palpitations. Just now, all of them almost lost their lives here. If Pierce hadn't surrendered in time, several of them would have died. Thinking of this, everyone looked at Pierce with more respect. But at this moment, Pierce was not feeling well, and could even be said to be extremely uncomfortable. He knew very well that, even though the current troubles were solved, this was just the beginning. After dawn, the subsequent troubles would really erupt. Attacking the head of a consortium is not so easy to end in this country, where capital is supreme. But that's all for the future. It's more important to deal with the current things first. Thinking of this, Pierce turned around and ordered, "Everyone, clean up the scene immediately and retreat. And the traces of battle on the battlefield, clean them all up for me. Hurry up." "Yes, Director." Everyone responded loudly, and SHIELD immediately started to operate at high speed. The wreckage of the Mecha Warrior was dragged away, the scene of the bombardment was cleaned up, and the damaged lawn was paved with new ones. Even the big hole in Tony's villa was being repaired quickly. One night passed quickly, and when Tony walked out of the guest room the next day, everything in the villa was restored to its original state. All traces of the battle last night were cleared away, and the big hole in the wall was restored to its original state. What's more exaggerated is that even the damaged furnishings in the room were restored to their original state. If Tony hadn't clearly remembered the battle that took place in the villa last night, he would have thought that everything last night was just a dream. For this reason, Tony couldn't help but silently give a thumbs up to SHIELD. Although its strength is a little poor, its efficiency is still quite high. Going to the kitchen to make a glass of milk and a sandwich, Tony sat on the sofa and enjoyed his breakfast. But at this moment, Jarvis' voice suddenly rang out. "Sir, I think you seem to have forgotten something." "Forgot what?" "Mr. Reed is still lying in the basement laboratory." After speaking, Tony paused in eating, and a trace of embarrassment appeared on his face. Chapter 34. It seems that the treatment is overdone. There were so many things going on last night that Tony subconsciously forgot about Reed, who had been staying in the underground laboratory. Tony walked towards the laboratory while holding a sandwich in his mouth. When he entered, a messy scene appeared in front of Tony. This place was obviously not a place that people from SHIELD could enter, so naturally no one cleaned it up. After taking a look at the messy laboratory, Tony did not find Reed, but saw Bruce, who continued to sleep in the nutrition cabin. "Jarvis, where is Reed?" "Under the experimental equipment near your left." Hearing this, Tony quickly cast his eyes on the pile of overturned experimental equipment and used his hands and feet to dig a few times, and Reed's figure suddenly appeared in front of Tony. He was lying on the ground with a pale face, and his breathing was extremely weak. If Tony could not vaguely feel his heartbeat, he almost thought Reed had become a dead man. Reed, as an ordinary person, was almost hit directly by Bucky's punch. He was able to withstand the serious injury for a night, which was considered to be his good physical fitness. In this case, if he was sent to the hospital, the doctor would definitely issue a death notice. Fortunately, Tony had drawn the horse charm, otherwise, he would be at a loss in the face of this situation. A burst of white light appeared on his hand. Soon, Reed was enveloped by the white light, and all the wounds on his body began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. The chest that had collapsed automatically returned to its original position at this moment, and Tony even heard the click of bones returning to their positions. In less than 10 seconds, Reed, who was on the verge of death, came back to life again. Even his pale face became much rosier. Only the horse charm has such a heaven-defying power, otherwise, even if it was gooey, things would not be so easy. His eyelids trembled slightly, and Reed slowly opened his eyes, looking at Tony who was close at hand. His consciousness quickly recovered. "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" Tony asked with concern. Reed shook his head to indicate that he was fine, then sat up from the ground and took a look at the messy scene around him. Reed subconsciously asked, "What time is it now? Is the matter over?" It's 9 o'clock in the morning." Tony felt a little guilty. Sure enough, Reed's expression stiffened when he heard the time. As a genius, his wisdom is not all in scientific research. Combined with the environment around him and the time Tony said, he found that he was really blessed by God to be alive. But he didn't delve into this matter. No matter what, he was still alive, and even alive and well, so the rest was not important. After taking a look at Bruce in the nutrition cabin, Reed suddenly turned his head and looked at Tony and said, "Boss, can I use that enhancer?" Hearing this, Tony looked at Reed, smiled and nodded. "Of course, but you'd better call me when you use it. I'll watch by the side, which is safer." "Okay, boss, then wait for me." Reed responded and quickly got up and got busy, without any intention of resting at all. Before yesterday, Reed had always positioned himself as a researcher, so even after seeing the terrifying strength of Happy after enhancement, he didn't have too many ideas. However, after being almost beaten to death by Bucky yesterday, he found that being a researcher was also a high-risk job. Without some strength, he didn't know when and how he would die. That's why he was so urgent. Tony looked at Reed's busy back, his eyes full of strangeness. He didn't know whether Reed, who had been injected with the enhancer, would mutate again in the future. If there was any accident, because the two were incompatible, it would be troublesome. However, since it was Reed's own choice, he would not interfere. He believed that people were different. Maybe Reed, who had been enhanced, would become stronger after going through the cosmic storm. No one could predict such things, so there was no need to stop it. Reed was busy making enhancers, and Tony was not idle either. In addition to S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military, there was also Bucky who attacked his villa last night. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military were fine, but it was not easy for him to tear his face directly, so Nick, who survived last night, was sent away by Tony. But Bucky was different. This guy was also a superhero. His Dark Alliance was in need of people, so how could he forget him? So, after the S.H.I.E.L.D. people withdrew last night, Tony asked Happy to take care of Bucky. Tony came to the guest room on the second floor of the villa and pushed the door open. Happy, with his upper body naked, was exercising seriously in the room. His explosive muscles were very impactful. If he walked out like this, I don't know how many middle-aged women would drool at him. "Boss, you are here." Seeing Tony come in, Happy quickly stopped with a smile on his face. Nodding slightly, Tony said casually, "Your current strength is fixed, and you can't improve it by exercising. Don't waste time." "Boss, I know, I'm just doing daily activities." Listening to Happy's pretentious words, if Tony didn't still remember his fat image, he would almost believe him. Without answering, Tony looked at Bucky who was unconscious on the bed and asked, "How is he? Is he awake?" Happy shook his head. "No, I don't know what happened to this guy. He is not injured, but he has been unconscious." "Boss, do you think he was beaten into a vegetable by the green big guy?" Although he did not see the scene of the green fat man showing his power, he heard Tony's story afterwards. "I don't know. I will give him treatment," Tony said uncertainly. Although Bucky was not an ordinary person, the green fat man's terrifying power was indeed abnormal. He was not sure whether Bucky was stupid because of the green fat man's punch. He stepped forward and put his hand on Bucky's face. A burst of white light emanated from his hand. 10 seconds later, Tony released his palm and waited quietly. Soon, Bucky, who was originally unconscious, had his eyelids trembling and finally opened his eyes. Seeing this, Tony immediately understood that it was indeed the green fat man who punched his head and caused problems. Who are you?" Bucky's surprised voice sounded, looking at Tony in front of him with a bewildered look on his face. And looking at his reaction, Tony instantly realized that something was wrong. This guy was completely different from his performance last night, without the slightest indifference. For a moment, a guess emerged in his mind. Who is Steve Rogers to you? You know Steve, I'm his friend. Where is he now? Bucky instantly said excitedly, and Tony patted his head helplessly, as if the treatment was overdone. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35, The Alliance of Light and the Sheep Spell. The one I saw last night should be Bucky, after he lost his memory and was transformed into the Winter Soldier by Hydra. The one now should be the original Bucky. After being treated by himself, he not only woke up from his coma, but also recovered his original memory. Thinking of this, Tony, who originally planned to force Bucky to join the Dark Alliance, had to change his plan. Do you remember what happened specifically? Tony took the initiative to guide him. Hearing this, Bucky couldn't help but recall, and as he fell into memories, all the memories, since he lost his memory, came to his mind. The same memory of last night also appeared in his mind. When he sorted out his thoughts, his eyes looking at Tony and the other suddenly became complicated. I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to do what happened last night. I don't know how I became like that. Bucky kept apologizing and explaining to himself. Tony smiled and said, it's okay, I know what happened last night was not your intention. Bucky seemed to feel much better after being forgiven. By the way, I shot a guy in the lab last night, is he okay? No, I rescued him. Besides, I saved you, too. Tony waved his hand indifferently and mentioned that he saved him. He is not a pushover, saving people without asking for anything in return. In comparison, he is more willing to repay a favor. After all, it is a fact that I saved him, and it is only right for him to repay me. When Bucky heard that it was Tony who saved him, he became more embarrassed. So it was you who saved me. Thank you, but I don't have anything to thank you for, or I can do something for you. Of course, you can't break the law. It can be seen that Bucky has become a good person after regaining his memory. But good people are good. He likes good people the most. With a smile on his lips, Tony said, what a coincidence. I just need your help with something. I created a bright alliance to help others, but because the alliance is just starting out, it is short of manpower. I think you are a good fit. Why don't you join my bright alliance? That way you can repay me. How about that? Tony lured Bucky like a child. Although Bucky felt that something was not right, he was confused because he had just recovered his memory and Tony was his savior, so he should repay him. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he nodded immediately. In that case, then okay, I'll join. After he finished speaking, Tony smiled, and the smile on his face was extremely bright. Because the system's prompt sounded in his ears, ding, the Dark Alliance has a new member, Bucky the Winter Soldier, and the reward has been issued. Name, Tony Stark. Gender, male. Identity, heir of the Shadow Kingdom. Abilities, Horse Spell, Dragon Spell, Control of Shadow Ninja, Control of Shadow Blade, Control of Shadow Knight. Bat. Number of draws, 1. Dark Alliance members, Spider-Man, Winter Soldier. Looking at the newly added Control of the Shadow Legion and the extra number of draws, Tony's eyes towards Bucky became much more pleasing. Okay, you have a good rest. If you need anything, tell Happy. He will take care of you during this time. After saying that, Tony turned around and left, ignoring the change in Happy's face. He behaved like a scumbag who left after having sex, only caring about his own pleasure and not caring about other people's feelings. Leaving the two grown men staring at each other, Tony returned to his room. The familiar lucky draw wheel appeared in front of him again. Tony rubbed his hands and said excitedly, Heaven and Earth, Tathagata, Sand King, God bless you, go. Tony quickly turned the lucky draw wheel while muttering something. Suddenly, the pointer on the wheel spun rapidly. Tony looked at the wheel nervously and ordered when he felt it was almost done, stop. After he finished speaking, the pointer slowed down rapidly and finally stopped. A sheep also appeared on the wheel and ran towards Tony quickly, diving into his mind. Boom. There was a roar in his mind, and a warm power quickly merged into his mind. Tony instantly felt his head clear and his whole body was extremely sober. Not only that, at this moment he felt that his perspective had become strange. People's eyes can generally only see a 124-degree perspective in front of them, and they can see the 25-degree scene more clearly by concentrating their attention. But now, Tony felt as if he had opened his eyes in the sky and could see things at 360 degrees, and it was extremely clear, and every detail was visible. As he concentrated, he could even feel an invisible force spreading out of his mind. In order to test it, he turned his head to look at the water cup on the table and subconsciously wanted to move it. Suddenly, the water cup actually floated up. Telekinesis. Tony murmured in surprise, and his heart was filled with joy. According to the information that flooded into his mind, the power of the sheep spell is to enhance mental strength and control the soul to leave the body. But he didn't expect that after the enhancement, it would produce such a terrifying power as telekinesis. In order to test the limit of telekinesis, he kept moving various things in the room and had a lot of fun. His mental power seemed to be endless. After playing for half an hour, he didn't feel any discomfort at all. As for the maximum power value of telekinesis, Tony didn't get a result. He only knew that, even if everything in the room was added together, telekinesis could be easily controlled. It made him almost want to try to move the villa under his feet. However, in order to avoid the trouble of changing houses, he gave up this idea. After attracting his telekinesis, Tony tried to have his soul leave his body again. Suddenly, Tony felt a chill all over his body. He looked down and found that his body had become completely transparent. Behind him, the other self was still standing there with his eyes closed, motionless. With a thought, Tony flew up directly, passed through the ceiling of the villa, and appeared in the outside world. Looking at the blue sky, white clouds, and endless ocean outside, Tony did not run far. He moved around for a while, and then returned to his body. Although he did not know whether there would be any hidden dangers of leaving his soul, he was used to the existence of his body, and preferred to stay in it. Just after he returned to his body, Jarvis' voice also sounded at this moment. "Sir, Mr. Reed has prepared the enhancer, and asked you to go to the laboratory." "Okay, I got it." Tony responded and used telekinesis to put everything in the room back in place, and then went downstairs to the underground laboratory. Entering the laboratory, Reed, who was already waiting, had a bright look in his eyes. "Boss, I'm ready. Can we start?" "Let's start." Tony nodded. Chapter 36, The Resentful and Angry Little Pepper. After Tony finished speaking, Reed nodded and walked into the test chamber with a serious face. Looking at Reed, who was a little nervous, Tony pressed the experiment button, and suddenly, the enhancer filled the entire test chamber and submerged Reed's body. With the previous successful experience, Tony was very calm this time, standing aside and waiting quietly. A few hours later, the door of the test chamber opened, and Reed walked out without changing his figure. Seeing this, Tony raised his eyebrows. "How do you feel?" "Great," Reed said with a smile on his face, and clenched his fists hard while speaking, feeling the abundant power in his body, and the whole person seemed a little excited. The experiment went smoothly without any accidents. Tony nodded, and Reed said at this moment, "Boss, the enhancer has been successfully researched, and I want to continue my research project." To put it bluntly, the research on the enhancer was only because of Tony's request, and his research was what he really cared about. Tony did not object to this, and nodded directly, saying, "Okay, I've prepared the money, and I'll transfer it to your account later. Help me get a few more enhancers, and you can go back to continue your research." "Okay." Reed nodded heavily, and at this time Tony had a flash of inspiration in his mind. "By the way, I want to invite you to join the alliance I formed. What do you think?" Tony's words were a bit abrupt, but Reed didn't think much about it, and nodded with a smile. "No problem, boss, since it's the alliance you formed, I'm willing to join." After saying that, Tony waited with full expectation. In his opinion, Reed will also be a superhero in the future. Although he has not experienced the cosmic storm and become Mr. Fantastic, after using the enhancer, his strength is only higher than the original, and inviting him to join the alliance should be rewarded. However, after waiting for a long time, the system's voice did not sound as if it had crashed. Tony's heart sank immediately, but he did not show it. He encouraged Reed a few words and left the laboratory. Back in the room, Tony's impatient voice suddenly rang out. "System, what's going on?" he asked subconsciously, completely forgetting that the system was not intelligent and naturally could not answer his questions. Fortunately, the loss of composure was only temporary. He quickly adjusted his mentality and compared Reed with Bucky and Peter. At least he had to figure out why the system had no reaction to Reed's joining. In terms of strength, this point can be ignored. After using the enhancer, Reed's strength is not weaker than the two people in the Dark Alliance. So what is the difference between them? Frowning, Tony's thoughts kept turning, constantly comparing the differences between the three. After eliminating many doubts, he soon discovered the differences between the two sides. Whether it was Peter or Bucky, they had already gained recognition from the outside world. A Spider-Man and a Winter Soldier. People who had come into contact with the extraordinary basically knew about the two. On the other hand, although Reed's reputation was also very loud, it was the reputation of a scientist. As for the so-called Mr. Fantastic, only Tony knew about it, and no one outside recognized it at all. So, if you want to join the Dark Alliance, you must be a famous superhero or villain? Tony thought with some uncertainty, and he didn't know if his guess was right, and he needed to verify it later. Thinking of this, Tony immediately spoke. "Jarvis, help me contact Peter." "Okay, sir." Soon, Peter's phone was connected, and Tony's calm voice also sounded in the room. "How is the mission completed?" On the other end of the phone, Peter listened to Tony's words, and a trace of embarrassment flashed across his face. "It will take a little time." After getting part of the command of the Shadow Corps, he was a little carried away and didn't have time to find trouble with Norman. Now that he was questioned by Tony, he panicked. And listening to Peter's answer, Tony couldn't help but flash a trace of speechlessness on his face. It's been a few days, and it hasn't been done yet, so he didn't know what to say. At that moment, Tony's tone became stern and said, "Tonight, I want to see Norman, that's it." After that, Tony hung up the phone directly, not giving Peter any chance to refuse. Slowly exhaling a breath of foul air, Tony put the matter behind him for the time being, changed his clothes, and left the villa. Driving a sports car, he sped all the way and soon arrived at the Stark Industrial Building. As he walked into the company, people kept greeting him along the way. In response, Tony nodded to them and walked past them with a calm face. Taking the exclusive elevator to the office, Natasha, who got the news, also walked in. "Mr. Tony, it's been a long time since we last met. Coffee or red wine? Give me a cup of tea," Tony said casually, while taking off his suit jacket and throwing it on the sofa. Natasha was slightly stunned when she heard this, but soon nodded. "Okay, sir." Soon, she returned to the office with a cup of green tea. Tony took a sip and said calmly, "Please call Potts over for me." "Okay, sir." Natasha turned and left again. Tony didn't have to wait too long. Soon, Potts, dressed in a professional suit, with black stockings wrapped around her legs and high heels, walked into the office. After not seeing each other for a few days, Potts looked even more attractive. "Tony, what do you want to talk to me about? I still have a lot of documents waiting to be processed." Potts complained a little and looked at Tony with dissatisfaction. Tony was comfortable being a hands-off boss, but the group's affairs still needed to be handled. As the president, Potts could only help Tony clean up his mess. So looking at Potts's eyes, Tony coughed lightly with some embarrassment, and then said, "Don't get excited, I was delayed by something." "What can you do? You're busy picking up beautiful women again," Potts complained, and his eyes became particularly resentful. Hearing this, the embarrassment on Tony's face became more intense, but fortunately this time he had a legitimate reason, so he was not panicked at all. "I didn't pick up beautiful women, I was attacked last night." He opened his mouth to talk about what happened last night, and the expression on Potts' face changed instantly. "Damn it, they are so bold, how dare they attack you?" Just wait, I'll teach them a lesson. After saying that, Pod stood up and left, with a murderous look on her pretty face. Tony is her Achilles heel. Although she doesn't have a good attitude towards Tony, she will fight anyone who hurts Tony. And Natasha, who has been standing aside, also had an awkward expression on her face at this moment. She is from SHIELD and came to approach Tony specifically to find out his secrets, but she didn't expect that SHIELD had already taken action. If her identity was discovered, could she still walk out of Stark Industries safely? Thinking of this, Natasha glanced at Tony guiltily and happened to see that Tony was looking at her meaningfully, which startled her heart. Chapter 37. You have to give me an explanation. Mr. Tony, nothing, I'm going out first. Natasha felt a little guilty when she was looked at by Tony and wanted to leave. Seeing this, Tony didn't say anything, but just stretched out his hand and pulled Natasha into his arms. Ah. Natasha was caught off guard with a cry of surprise. Don't leave in a hurry, since you are here, why don't you play a little game together? Tony said slowly with a smile on his face. He had been ignoring her before, but now that S.H.I.E.L.D. has taken action, he should also collect some interest. He is not a person who will not fight back when he suffers a loss. Therefore, when he spoke, his palms began to wander. Feeling the changes in her body, Natasha's expression changed, and her face quickly became ruddy. Mr. Tony, don't be like this. Her tone seemed a little weak, and her expression was a little pleading. As a top agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., she would naturally not be so weak, so the attitude she showed at the moment was 3/10 true and 7/10 false, which perfectly matched the role she was playing now. Seeing Natasha still acting with him, Tony's expression gradually became playful. He had already prepared for Natasha to turn hostile, but he didn't expect that she didn't intend to reveal her identity. In this case, Tony was happy to take advantage of her. What's wrong with me? Am I not talking to you about work now? Have you ever heard of the saying that as a boss's secretary, you must be capable in addition to being beautiful? Tony added an emphasis to the last two words, which made people think about it. Natasha, who was originally planning to act, was shocked when she heard this. This guy wouldn't want to do that kind of thing now. Thinking of this, she subconsciously wanted to get out of Tony's arms, but just when she tried to force it, a stronger force came from Tony, suppressing her body tightly, making her unable to resist at all. Mr. Tony. With a cry of surprise, Natasha felt that Tony's palm had already reached into the jungle and hurriedly covered the hem of her skirt with both hands. Don't do that, Natasha said with shame and anger. Hearing this, Tony suddenly stopped what he was doing and his face turned cold. In that case, then go to the finance office to settle and leave. Natasha was stunned, looking at Tony with disbelief. Is this man born in the year of the dog? He turned against her at any time. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. But there was one thing, she must not be fired. She came here with a mission. If she was fired before the mission was completed, how could she end up well after returning? Her thoughts turned quickly in her mind, and only a moment passed in the outside world. Seeing that Tony was about to pull his hand back, Natasha couldn't help but reach out and hold Tony's palm. Mr. Tony, don't do this. It was still the same words, but this time the tone was completely different. Looking at the submissive Natasha, Tony's mouth curled up again with a smile. 20 minutes later, Natasha walked out of Tony's office with her mouth covered. It's true that Natasha is really capable. After Natasha left, Tony, who was refreshed, asked Jarvis to call Rod. Hey, Tony, what do you want to talk to me about? Rod's voice came from the phone. Tony didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. I was attacked. The attacker is from the military. I think you should give me an explanation. Hearing this, Rod on the other side of the phone was stunned. Who is so bold? After reacting, Rod's voice with suppressed anger sounded. Tony said calmly as always, you can find out who it is. I provided so many cheap and exquisite weapons to the military. How can you treat your partners like this? You must give me an explanation for this matter, otherwise, I will give you an explanation. Tony's words were full of threats, and Rod was shocked. Stark Industries supplies almost 1/3 of the weapons of the US military. Once Stark stops supplying, the military will definitely be in big trouble. Thinking about the terrible consequences, Rhodes said quickly, "Don't be impulsive, Tony. We will definitely give you an explanation for this matter. I hope so. Tell me if you have any news." After that, Tony hung up the phone, and Colonel Ross on the other end of the phone immediately walked into his boss's office. While Tony was on the phone, Potts was not idle either, and made calls one after another. Soon, a piece of news spread throughout the upper echelons of the United States that Tony, the head of Stark Industries, was attacked by the US government. The matter suddenly became a big deal, and the originally calm upper echelons of the United States became undercurrents, and calls were made directly to the White House. The power from the Cheeble began to show its ferocious fangs, and the US government was directly under tremendous pressure. Such pressure came not only from Stark Industries, it also came from major groups such as Avant-Garde Technology and Hammer Industries. The major groups usually fight to the death for their own interests, and Hammer Industries is the absolute enemy of Stark Industries. The conflict between the two sides is almost irreconcilable. But now, Hammer Industries also stood on Tony's side and put pressure on the US government together because they broke the rules. This rule is not to protect a certain person, but to protect all the Cheebles. If they dare to attack Tony today, who can guarantee that they will not attack them tomorrow? Therefore, this matter has nothing to do with right or wrong. All the guys who break the rules must die. In the military district, General Ross's office, looking at the investigator standing in front of him, General Ross's face looked extremely ugly. He knew the horror of the Cheebles, so in the matter against Tony, he only sent a small team, and he was not involved at all. He didn't even sign the action order, but he didn't expect that he would still be implicated. "General Ross, please hand over the work as soon as possible." After the investigator finished speaking, he saluted and turned to leave the office. General Ross sat dejectedly in the office chair, a little lost. After the decision of the military's top meeting, he was transferred to serve as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. In terms of authority, he was even promoted. But in terms of power, he almost lost most of his power. A foreign minister and a powerful lieutenant general, even a fool would know which one is better. If possible, he would rather be demoted and stay in the military than serve as a foreign minister. But this is not up to him. The fact that he was transferred to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was the result of the forces behind him trying their best to protect him. If he had not been too involved in this matter, I'm afraid he would not even be the foreign minister. Thinking of this, General Ross laughed at himself. Cheeble, damn Cheeble. Chapter 38 Nick Fury kills Pierce. Compared to General Ross's dismal exit, S.H.I.E.L.D., as the main culprit, was even more miserable. All the S.H.I.E.L.D. executives who participated in the attack on Tony were either dismissed or arrested and imprisoned for professional crimes. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Alexander Pierce was dismissed from his post as S.H.I.E.L.D. Director, ending his political life. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D., after the government personnel read out the order, another order was quickly produced. In order to ensure the continued operation of S.H.I.E.L.D., after the upper-level research and decision, Nick Fury will take over as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. After the words fell, everyone present turned to look at Nick, their eyes full of envy. In this incident, Nick was one of the few people who escaped by chance. First, he had someone above him, and second, the government could not put everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. in jail. So after friendly consultations, Nick escaped this purge, and even turned a disaster into a blessing, and successfully took over the position of director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Facing the congratulations from many colleagues, Nick nodded in response. Pierce, who had just been fired, looked at this scene with a frighteningly dark face. HMPH. With a cold snort, Pierce turned around and walked back to his office. Not long after he entered the office, Hit pushed the door open and walked in. "Boss." Hit greeted him. Pierce took a deep breath and forced himself to suppress the anger caused by leaving. "Hit, I can no longer stay in S.H.I.E.L.D. Next, you will be the top leader lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. has just been in chaos, so it is not suitable to take too many actions. Order all members to enter a dormant state and wait to be awakened. I will contact you in other ways in the future." Pierce explained the aftermath, and Hit listened respectfully and nodded from time to time. Soon, after explaining everything, Pierce also packed up his things, got up with the box, and planned to leave the office. Watching this scene, the silent Hit finally spoke up. "Boss, where are you going next?" Hearing this, Pierce shook his head helplessly. I plan to leave the United States directly. Without the official amulet, it's too dangerous for me to stay here. I have booked the plane ticket and will leave later. Facing his confidant, Pierce almost did not hide anything. At the same time, his words were full of helplessness. One's own family knows one's own business. When he was the director, he had offended quite a few people. What's more, he planned the attack on Tony. Based on his understanding of Tony, that guy's not a generous person, so it's best to leave New York directly. Otherwise, he is afraid that he will not see the sun the next day. I'll take you there, boss, Hit said. Hearing this, Pierce hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. Okay. After that, the two left S.H.I.E.L.D. one after the other and drove to the airport. Along the way, Pierce closed his eyes and rested while Hit drove the car to the airport. However, along the way, he would occasionally look at Pierce sitting in the backseat through the rearview mirror. As time passed, the two were getting closer and closer to the airport. Suddenly, there was a sound of cars outside the car window. Several black cars suddenly appeared, driving side by side with the car Pierce was riding in, and accelerated, blocking Pierce's way forward. Squeak. A sudden brake sounded, and the car Pierce was riding in was forced to stop. Pierce in the backseat shook his body and opened his eyes instantly. Looking at the scene outside the car, Pierce's originally calm expression suddenly became gloomy. Soon, outside the car, Nick, who had just taken office as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., walked out of the car with a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. members. Seeing this, Pierce's uneasy premonition became stronger. At the same time, his eyes were also looking at Hit in the driver's seat. In addition to him, Hit was the only one who told Hit about his going to the airport. The fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. could catch up so quickly was obviously leaked by someone. Why? Pierce said in a deep voice, with a strong murderous intent in his tone. He never thought that his confidant would betray him. Boss, I had no choice before, but now I want to be a good person. Surrender. Hit said calmly. Pierce suddenly laughed in anger. Surrender? I will not be willing to die unless I get rid of you, the traitor. With a roar, Pierce reached into his arms and took out a gun. Hit was prepared for this and quickly opened the door and rolled out of the vehicle. Having lost his target, Pierce did not hesitate to open the door and get out of the car. Nick and others who had surrounded the car saw this and raised their guns. Pierce, you are in trouble. I'm arresting you for espionage now. Put down your guns immediately and stop your meaningless resistance. Otherwise I have the right to shoot you on the spot. Nick warned loudly, and Hit took the opportunity to hide behind the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. Looking at this scene, Pierce also knew that the situation was over, but surrender was impossible. Hail Hydra! Pierce shouted the slogan of Hydra and instantly fired his gun. The bullet went towards it. As a traitor, Hit was the guy Pierce hated the most, so he ignored the others and pointed his gun directly at Hit. When Pierce fired, the S.H.I.E.L.D. members who had been aiming at him also fired, and for a while, the gunshots were loud. 10 seconds later, the gunshots on the road stopped. Pierce, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., was eventually shot dead by members of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the road. The dense blood holes filled his body, which looked particularly creepy. In addition to him, there was another dead person at the scene. Hit. He was pierced through the eyebrows by a bullet from Pierce, and his eyes were full of disbelief. As a spy trained by Hydra, Pierce is also an excellent agent with outstanding marksmanship. Under his single-minded killing, Hit did not escape the fate of death after all. After killing Pierce, Nick and the others put away their guns, and two S.H.I.E.L.D. members quickly stepped forward to check on Pierce. Report. Confirmed dead. Okay, I see. Clean up the battlefield. After giving the order, Nick turned back to the car, and several S.H.I.E.L.D. members quickly cleaned up the scene. Sitting in the car, Nick rubbed his eyebrows tiredly. When he was still under Pierce's command, he had already suspected Pierce's identity, but because Pierce was his immediate superior, he could only endure it. Even if Hit hadn't betrayed him, Pierce would not have been able to leave the United States today, so Hit's betrayal only confirmed his own guess. Therefore, the death of the two is not worth being sad about. The only regret is that the two died too quickly and failed to dig out all the rats inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Fortunately, all the high-level Hydra officials have been eliminated, and the remaining small characters can no longer cause any trouble. Chapter 39. Spider-Man fights Green Goblin again. The thoughts in his mind flowed slowly, and Nick quickly put Pierce and the other two behind him, and Tony's figure appeared in his mind. This is also an unstable factor, especially the power displayed by Tony, which is even more troublesome for him. With the current strength of S.H.I.E.L.D., it is not enough to fight Tony, which is undoubtedly a difficult thing for S.H.I.E.L.D. Although Tony's identity is destined to make him not as dangerous as Pierce, at least there is no need to worry about him assassinating high-level politicians. But as an unstable factor, S.H.I.E.L.D. must have the power to check and balance him, and can't just leave it alone. Thinking silently in his heart, Nick exhaled a breath of turbine air with a headache. While he was thinking about Tony, on the other side, in Stark Industries, Tony was also listening to Happy's report. So, Pierce is dead. Yes, boss, he was beaten to death by S.H.I.E.L.D. people. I saw it with my own eyes. Well, I know, you go back first. Happy nodded and turned to walk out of the office. Just as Pierce guessed, Tony has never been a generous person. How could he let Pierce go alive when he planned to attack him? If he was still the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony would have to consider the reaction of the US government. After all, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. is also a high-ranking official. However, after receiving the news that he was dismissed, Tony immediately sent Happy to follow Pierce and find a suitable opportunity to kill him. Unexpectedly, before he could do anything, S.H.I.E.L.D. had already taken the initiative to kill him. This result is undoubtedly the best result for Tony. The enemy is dead, and he doesn't have to dirty his hands. How great. However, Nick actually got promoted, like in the original book, which Tony didn't expect. He was still thinking that Nick might be taken down this time. Unexpectedly, this guy has something. Not only did he escape, but he was also promoted. I don't know if it was really an accident or the correction of the world. Thinking silently, Tony quickly put away his thoughts and stopped thinking about these messy things. How things are going now has nothing to do with him. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military have already paid the price, and he has to stop while he is ahead. It is impossible to continue to target them. Otherwise, although the power of the Chi-Ball is strong, the US government is not just for show. He sees this very clearly. At this time, the door of the office was pushed open, and Natasha walked in with a cup of tea. Looking at him, Tony raised the corner of his mouth and waved his hand. Seeing this, Natasha's face turned red, but she still walked over. Soon, Tony, who was sitting on the office chair, showed a trace of comfort on his face, and under the desk, Natasha was secretly eating a banana. An hour later, Natasha walked out of the office, and Tony, who was relaxed, took the exclusive elevator and left Stark Industries. Stark Industries affairs were basically handled by Potts. He had nothing to do here, so naturally he didn't want to stay here all the time. After a day of wandering outside, Tony returned to the villa with two beauties at night and began the corrupt life of the rich. As a worker, Peter had to put on work clothes and start working outside when his boss was corrupt. Peter's figure swayed between the high-rise buildings and he came to the villa area where Norman lived with ease. The last attack failed, and this time he had to take Norman down. But he was not as impulsive as last time. This time he had a younger brother, so he didn't need to charge into battle himself. Mobilizing the inexplicable power in his body, black figures soon appeared around Peter. After a period of exploration, he was already familiar with the Black Shadow Corps and knew that it was a group of emotionless killing machines, so he didn't waste any words and directly ordered, "Take down everyone in the villa. If anyone resists, kill them all." After the words fell, the people of the Black Shadow Corps rushed to the villa one after another. Their figures blended perfectly into the night and were difficult to detect. But inside the villa, it seemed very empty and quiet at this moment. Norman shook the red wine glass and looked at the scene outside the window. After the last attack, he realized that he was exposed, so he dismissed all the servants in the villa and arranged his son Harry to live in another place, leaving himself alone here waiting for the enemy to come. He didn't know Peter's true identity, but since he had found himself, he would not give up easily. In order to deal with Peter, he chose to use himself as bait, and he didn't even care about revenge on Tony. Soon, the figure of the Black Shadow Ninja appeared in the villa and surrounded Norman in the hall. Looking at this scene, Norman, who had been calm, suddenly changed his face. He knew the Black Shadow Ninja. The last time he raided Tony's villa, he was repelled by these people. They actually appeared. Then the attack on himself was Tony's work. With his thoughts turning in his mind, Norman sorted out everything, and at this time the Black Shadow Ninja had already surrounded him. Looking at them, Norman snorted coldly, and the Green Goblin suit was quickly put on. He had been prepared for a long time, and put all the equipment by his side, so he finished the equipment as soon as possible. The blade cut through the air, and landed on the Green Goblin suit. Z. A series of harsh sounds rang out, and sparks flew all over Norman's body. Ha ha ha. Laughing strangely, Norman relied on the defense of the Green Goblin suit, and rushed directly into the Shadow Ninjas. He burst out with great power with one punch and one kick, directly smashing many Shadow Ninjas. But as the old saying goes, the advantage of the Shadow Ninjas has never been the strength of a single individual, but the number. No matter how strong Norman is, unless he can suppress the Shadow Ninjas with absolute strength, otherwise, he can only waste his energy in the endless offensive of the Shadow Ninjas. Soon, Norman also realized this, and the thermal imaging sensor was turned on directly, searching around. Since he couldn't completely solve the Shadow Ninjas, he would capture the thief and the king, and first solve the guy who controlled the Shadow Ninjas. Soon, Peter's thermal image appeared in Norman's view. Hey, found it. With a chuckle, a skateboard broke through the wall of the villa and appeared in front of Norman. Norman jumped up, flew out of the villa, and rushed towards Peter. Peter, who had been thinking about letting the Black Shadow Ninja consume some energy, saw this scene and immediately went straight to meet him without dodging. It was fine that he was beaten back last time, but he was completely unprepared and was caught off guard. This time he was well prepared, and if he was beaten back again, he would have to go. Do you really think he doesn't care about his face? Bang! The two fists collided fiercely, and a roar resounded through the night sky. Chapter 40. He is not an easy person to deal with. Under the night sky, the two figures flew backwards under the mutual force. One stepped on the skateboard, floating in the air, and the other fell on the wall with four limbs, holding the wall tightly. Are you Tony's man? Norman's voice sounded, with a hint of madness in his tone. Peter did not answer. He used to like to talk endlessly, but now he has no intention of talking nonsense in a fight. He learned this from Tony. People should be ruthless, and not talk too much. He saw spider silk shooting from his wrist, and rushed towards Norman quickly. Seeing this, Norman's hand appeared an alloy long knife, which was extremely sharp. This was the new equipment he made for himself. Two knife lights flashed, and the spider silk shot by Peter was directly cut in half by him. At the same time, his figure quickly approached Peter at this moment, and the alloy sword directly tore the air, making a whistling sound. But just as he approached Peter, the figure of the Black Shadow Ninja suddenly appeared and blocked him. Looking at this scene, under the mask, Norman's face suddenly changed, with a disgusting look on his face. He didn't expect Peter to be so shameless and use the Black Shadow Ninja as a human shield. It was really disgusting. The knife flashed, and the Black Shadow Ninja in front of him was directly chopped to death by him, and Peter took the opportunity to punch. Boom. The powerful punch hit Norman's chest heavily, and Norman fell directly to the ground. Cough cough. A violent cough sounded in his mouth. Although he was no longer the same, after using the human body enhancer, Peter was not an ordinary person. One punch had a force of thousands of kilograms. Even after being weakened by the Green Goblin suit, the remaining strength still dealt him a heavy blow. Damn it. Norman cursed angrily, and endured the pain, and soared into the sky again. Two pumpkin grenades were thrown directly, and appeared beside Peter in an instant. Seeing this, Peter did not dodge or evade, and directly let the Black Shadow Ninja build a human wall around him. Boom. A huge explosion sounded, and the Black Shadow Ninjas on the periphery were directly vaporized. Peter, who was standing in the center, was fine, and even his spider suit was not damaged at all. Watching this scene, Norman was completely speechless. Especially when the Black Shadow Ninjas appeared again, he couldn't help but want to curse. What the hell is this fight? His attack was blocked by the Black Shadow Ninja, and Peter's attack fell on him. This way of fighting was too shameless. For a moment, Norman couldn't help but want to retreat. After all, fighting without breaking the defense is meaningless. Anyway, it is himself who suffers. And just when he was about to retreat, Peter rushed up again. Compared with Norman's depression, Peter was completely excited at this moment. He could hit others, but others couldn't hit him. Is there anything more exciting than this? So Peter's fighting enthusiasm can be said to be very high. A burst of punches and flesh sounds kept ringing, and the black shadow ninjas assisted from the side, attacking or defending, and Norman was beaten very uncomfortable. Finally, the skateboard under his feet took him up into the sky, and he planned to run away. Seeing this scene, Peter's eyes flashed. How could he let this guy go? The spider silk in his hand was launched and landed directly on the flying skateboard. Then Peter suddenly exerted force. Norman, who was originally stable, suddenly shook violently. The next second, his originally rising body fell directly to the ground and hit the ground hard, making a loud noise. Bang! A huge pit was smashed into the ground, and Norman almost died. Before he could get up, Peter's figure quickly appeared in front of him and punched his mask. Bang! The sound of metal collision echoed, and Norman's head seemed to be hit by a truck, and he was dizzy in an instant. After Peter gained the upper hand, the offensive did not stop at all, and punched Norman one after another. Bang, bang, bang. After a full minute, Peter finally stopped attacking, and the Green Goblin mask was completely deformed at this moment. As for Norman, he had fainted completely. Although his physical fitness was extraordinary, he could not withstand Peter's bombardment all the time. It was like an ordinary person couldn't bear having his head crushed by a dozen trucks. After taking off the Green Goblin mask and confirming that Norman was really fainted, Peter breathed a sigh of relief. Although there was Shadow Core to assist, the danger of the battle was not low at all. So he dared not be careless. After resting for a while, Peter let two shadow ninjas carry Norman and took him away. Half an hour later, he passed through the Manhattan Shield District and came to Tony's villa in Free City. In the room, Tony, who had finished exercising, also heard Jarvis's reminder. "Sir, Mr. Peter is here and is outside the door." "Oh, let him in," Tony responded, put on his pajamas and walked downstairs. When he came to the living room, Peter, who was in a mess, had been waiting there for a long time. "I brought the person you wanted." Peter looked at Tony, who was going downstairs, and said, looking at Tony with envy, "Thanks to the super spider sense, even if he didn't go upstairs, he knew the general situation in the room." In addition to Tony, there were two beauties in the room. Thinking about his own night, and then thinking about Tony's night, how could he not be envious as a young man? But it was just envy. He could get 20 million after completing the task, and then he could be free and easy. Thinking of this, a trace of longing appeared on Peter's face. Tony naturally didn't know what Peter was thinking. Looking at Norman, who was thrown on the floor of the living room, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Good job, hard work." After praising, he turned his head and looked at the guest room on the first floor and said, "Bucky." As soon as he finished speaking, the door opened, and Bucky walked out. "Boss, what's wrong?" "I'll leave this guy to you. He's not a pushover. Be careful." Tony pointed at Norman on the ground, and Bucky took a look and nodded. "Don't worry, boss, I will definitely keep an eye on this guy." As he spoke, Bucky stepped forward and picked up Norman on the ground. At this moment, Tony also introduced the two. "He is Peter, and he is also a member of the Alliance like you." Hearing this, Bucky nodded to Peter, and Peter nodded in response, but there was not much communication. Neither of them was a talkative person, so naturally they could not be enthusiastic. Tony didn't mind this, he just let them know each other's existence, to avoid accidentally bumping into each other and fighting in the future. As for whether they can get along well, that is not his concern. He is not so free. Soon, Norman was taken away by Bucky, and Peter also said a little embarrassedly at this moment, "Mr. Tony, when will you pay me the reward you promised?" Hearing this, Tony raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. Soon. Chapter 41, You Are Dead or Missing. After that, Tony asked for Peter's account and directly transferred 20 million yuan from his personal account. Soon, Peter received a text message from the bank, and his face suddenly showed a flush of excitement. After all, he was just a young man. Although he seemed calmer than his peers, because of the mutation. But when he suddenly got a huge fortune, he was still as excited as an ordinary person. "Thank you, Mr. Tony. If there is nothing else, I will leave first." Peter thanked him and left the villa directly after obtaining Tony's consent. Looking at his appearance, Tony knew what he wanted to do without thinking. It was nothing more than squandering this wealth. In this regard, he naturally would not stop it, and he was too lazy to pay attention, but turned to Bucky's room. Pushing the door in, Bucky immediately greeted him. "Boss." Tony nodded at him, and his eyes were on Norman. Compared with other superheroes, Tony obviously puts more energy into Norman, not because he is better or stronger, but because he has the Austin Group behind him. Although the revenue of the Austin Group has not been very good in recent years, as the saying goes, a lean camel is bigger than a horse. As one of the top financial groups, the strength of the Austin Group is still not to be underestimated. Therefore, in addition to wanting to absorb Norman into the Dark Alliance, Tony also wants to swallow up the Austin Group in one bite. It can be predicted that once the two financial groups merge, Stark Industries will completely become a behemoth. Unless Tony raises the flag of rebellion, no official force will dare to embarrass him. An attack like the previous one is even less likely to happen. Even if he really steps on the edge of the law, the US government will have to clean up his ass instead of issuing a warrant to arrest him. Of course, the premise of all this is that he can successfully swallow up the Austin Group. Otherwise, relying on Stark Industries alone, although it is still one of the top financial groups in the United States, it is still a step behind. "Find a way to wake him up," Tony ordered, and Bucky nodded immediately. Although he had recovered his memory, he had come out of Hydra after all, so he was not too familiar with interrogation and criminal investigation. He took a towel and a bottle of mineral water, put the towel on Norman's face, and Bucky opened the bottle of mineral water, letting the mineral water flow down. Soon, the unconscious Norman moved, and his body suddenly struggled violently. If his hands and feet were not bound, he would have gotten up from the ground long ago. Stopping the water, Bucky pulled the towel off Norman's face. Hoo. Suddenly, a strong gasp sounded, and Norman was like a drowning man breathing fresh air, gasping desperately. At the same time, his eyes quickly swept across the room, and the moment he saw Tony, his eyes fixed on Tony. "It's you," Norman said in a hoarse voice. Tony's mouth suddenly showed a hint of smile. "Mr. Osborn, long time no see. I didn't expect to meet you in this kind of occasion. I'm really sorry. What do you want to do?" Norman said viciously. "Shouldn't I be the one asking you this? It seems like you attacked me first." Tony spread his hands, and Norman paused. "Okay, I admit it's my fault. Now I'm in your hands. You should tell me what your purpose is. Of course, if you are purely seeking revenge for my previous attack, then just pretend I didn't say anything." As the head of a Chibal, Norman is undoubtedly qualified, and not lacking in calmness. Even if his current situation looks bad, he can still sort out his thoughts instead of yelling like an ordinary person. It's comfortable to talk to smart people. "I invited you here today for something. I heard that the recent business performance of the Austin Group is not good, and the major shareholders are preparing to withdraw their shares. It just so happens that I have too much money recently, and have nowhere to put it. Why don't you let me help you?" Tony smiled, his big white teeth flashing coldly under the light, looking like a beast about to eat, with his bloody mouth opened wide. "Impossible, don't even think about it." Norman became excited instantly, and his roar resounded throughout the room. He can accept anyone to invest, but he can't accept the Chibal. As a member of the Chibal, he knows the nature of the Chibal too well. It is completely a prehistoric beast that eats people without spitting out bones. Once they are allowed to hold shares in the Austin Group will be at risk of being swallowed up at any time. What's more, there is a grudge between him and Tony. He has not forgotten that the reason why the Austin Group has come to this point today is that Tony has pushed it hard. Tony, who was rejected, was not annoyed at the moment. He still kept a smile on his face and said slowly, "Do you think you still have room for choice now? I know you want to maintain the integrity of the Austin Group, but if you are gone, who do you think can support the Austin Group? Rely on your useless son? Or rely on those cold-blooded capital? The current Austin Group is only left with one breath. If you are here, it can still hold on and find a chance to survive. Once you die or disappear, the huge Austin Group will fall apart in an instant. So, it is not difficult to accept for me to invest. I can even promise not to interfere in the specific affairs of the Austin Group, and you will still be the head of the Austin Group. How about it? Consider it." Tony's words were not sharp, but at this moment they were like a sharp blade, constantly piercing Norman's heart. At this moment, rationality and sensibility occupied one side of his mind. Reason told him that Tony was right. If he accepted Stark's investment, the Austin Group still had a chance. Sensibility, however, says that he is lying to you, that the Cheebles are all devils who eat people without leaving any bones, and that he must not be allowed to enter the market, otherwise the Austin Group will definitely change hands. The two concepts were fighting each other in his mind, and his face became uncertain. Seeing his appearance, Tony did not stay in the room any longer. He knew that Norman could not make a decision for a while, so after asking Bucky to watch over him, he turned around and left the room. Returning to his room, Tony took off his pajamas and walked over to the two sleeping beauties on the bed. "The night is still long, how can we waste this great time?" Soon, the room was full of spring, and it was filled with the breath of spring again. Early the next morning, someone threw out last night's garbage, and Tony sat in the living room quietly enjoying breakfast. Just then, Bucky walked out of the room and came to the living room. "Boss, that guy wants to see you and says he wants to talk to you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 42. You are not qualified to negotiate terms. Tony stepped into the room and saw Norman again. He seemed much calmer than last night. "How is it? Have you thought it through?" Tony asked with a smile. Hearing this, Norman looked up at him and said, "I agree to let you invest in the Austin Group, but you have to promise me one thing. I want to exchange shares with you." This was the only solution he came up with, after thinking all night. If the Austin Group wants to survive, it must accept Tony's investment. In order to prevent Tony from swallowing up the Austin Group and kicking him out after he moves in, he also needs a guarantee. And this guarantee is the shares of Stark Industries. Now all the shares of Stark Industries are in Tony's hands. Even if he also holds shares of Stark Industries, he cannot threaten Tony. On the contrary, the Austin Group has many shareholders. Once Tony enters the market, he will be qualified to acquire shares, which may lead to the change of ownership of the Austin Group. So exchanging shares, although it does not pose any threat to Tony, can prevent himself from being kicked out and ending up with nothing. Tony raised his eyebrows slightly and refused flatly. "No, you don't have the capital to negotiate. You only have two choices now. Either watch the Aoshi Group go bankrupt, or accept my capital injection. Other than that, you have no choice." Hearing this, Norman's seemingly stable mood suddenly became crazy. "Impossible. I know you just want to swallow my Aoshi Group in one bite. I tell you, even if I die, I will never let you succeed." As he spoke, Norman struggled violently again. After the injection of the human enhancer, his emotions were already problematic, and now after being stimulated by Tony, he became even crazier. Tony watched this scene quietly, his face as calm as ever. After a long time, the out-of-control Norman calmed down again, and Tony, who had been silent all the time, spoke again. "Have you thought it through?" It was still the same question as before, and the same tone. Tony seemed to have forgotten that he had just been rejected. Seeing this, Norman couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Are you sure you can take me down? Aren't you afraid that I will really destroy the O-Style Group and not accept your proposal?" Norman's tone was full of helplessness. He was indeed crazy just now, but no matter how crazy he was still the head of the O-Style Group. Therefore, the so-called madness was more for Tony to see, wanting to gain more benefits. But Tony was not only calmer than he thought, but also very indifferent. It's just the O-Style Group. If it's destroyed, it's destroyed. Anyway, it doesn't belong to me now. Do you think I will feel bad for something that doesn't belong to me? But for you, it's different. The O-Style Group is your hard work. If it really goes bankrupt, will you be willing to give it up? Tony asked back with a smile, and Norman lowered his head dejectedly. He understood that he lost, not because he was not as good as Tony, but because the gap between the advantages and disadvantages of the two sides was not equal from the beginning. You win, I accept your investment, and I hope you can bring the O-Style group back to life. After saying this, Norman seemed to have been drained of all his energy and spirit, and the whole person seemed to have become much older. Seeing his look, Tony frowned. I said, I won't interfere in the business of the O-Style group, you still take charge of the overall situation. Capital may not keep its word, but I, Tony, keep my word. After saying this, Norman suddenly raised his head and stared at Tony. He was ready to be kicked out. But Tony seemed to really intend to keep his promise. Are you serious? Norman said uncertainly. Tony spread his hands and said, if you know me well enough, you should know that I hate dealing with company affairs the most. Hearing this, Norman suddenly remembered the other party's reputation as a playboy, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Although he was a little speechless, it was undoubtedly a great thing to be able to continue to be in charge of the O-Style group. Thank you, Norman said softly. If it weren't for Tony's keen senses, he might not be able to hear his words clearly. With a nonchalant smile, Tony turned and left the room. Coming to the living room, Tony's voice suddenly rang in the living room. Jarvis, call Potts. Okay, sir, I've connected you. Hey, Tony, what's up? Potts' voice rang out. Contact the Osage Group and prepare to invest. Also, find the shareholders of the Osage Group and take over all their shares. Hearing this, Potts on the other end of the phone was stunned for a moment. What did you say? Did the Osage Group agree to our investment? Potts said in disbelief. As top cheebles, except for some business dealings that would involve share swaps and cooperation, how could several major cheebles in the same industry accept another giant in the same industry to invest in the company? Therefore, Potts' tone was full of surprise. Don't worry, I've already discussed the things you're worried about. Now you just need to do what I say, Tony said confidently. Potts on the other end of the phone immediately nodded heavily. Okay, don't worry, I'll do it now. After saying that, without waiting for Tony's consent, Potts hung up the phone directly. After hanging up the phone, Potts took action immediately and organized negotiators to go to the OS Group. At the same time as she took action, the OS Group also received a call from Norman. Because he and Tony had already negotiated, Stark Industries' entry into the OS Group was obviously much faster than normal shareholding. In just one afternoon, the two sides negotiated all the details. Stark Industries exchanged 10 billion yuan for 10% of the shares of the OS Group. After the negotiation, Potts immediately found several major shareholders of the OS Group and wanted to take their shares in full. In the case of the OS Group's annual losses, these shareholders had long wanted to withdraw. The emergence of Stark Industries was undoubtedly a life-saving straw for them, so the two sides talked happily. It took 3 days for Stark Industries to take 55% of the shares of the OS Group in one fell swoop, becoming the largest shareholder of the OS Group. As the head of the group, Norman only had 43% of the shares at this moment, and the remaining 2 points were circulated on the stock market. It can be said that as long as Tony is willing, he can start the acquisition now, forcefully acquire Norman's shares, and swallow up the OS Group. But as he said, he is a playboy and doesn't like managing a company, and Potts' ability to manage a Stark industry is already the limit, so Tony has no intention of coveting Norman's shares. In this way, a business change that shocked the entire upper class of the United States ended in just 3 days. Chapter 43, Captain America is waking up. S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick listened to his subordinates' reports with a blank expression on his face, and no one could tell what he was thinking. With the lesson of Pierce, S.H.I.E.L.D. dared not to take action against Tony again, but the necessary surveillance was still indispensable. The original Stark Industries was already feared by people. Now, Stark Industries has invested in the OS Group and become the largest shareholder, becoming even stronger. This is not good news for forces other than Stark Industries. Waving his hand and letting the report go, Nick stood up and walked to the window. Looking at the scene outside the window, his eyes were full of heaviness. Stark Industries is getting stronger and stronger, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. he controls has not only not become stronger, but has lost a large number of elite agents because of the previous attack. It can be predicted that, if it continues like this, SHIELD will become weaker and weaker. Whether it is to protect the security of the United States or to maintain the status of SHIELD, it is urgent to enhance the strength of SHIELD. Especially in terms of extraordinary combat power. It is ridiculous that such a large SHIELD can't produce much extraordinary combat power. Therefore, the first thing Nick did after taking office was to find extraordinary combat power and join SHIELD. After several days of exploration, SHIELD finally has a suitable target. The former patron saint of the United States, Captain America. Back then, Captain America's plane crashed and disappeared, but no one was sure whether he was dead or not. For this reason, Nick specially sent people to search for the place where Captain America disappeared that year, hoping to get good news. Perhaps it is a response to the heart's thoughts. Just when Nick was in a trance, a phone ring broke the silence of the office. Waking up from his trance, Nick answered the phone. "Boss, great discovery. There is a huge ice in the North Sea, and there is a guy frozen in it, who seems to be the legendary Captain America." The tone of the subordinates was full of excitement, and Nick's originally expressionless face also showed a violent emotional fluctuation at this moment. "Well done. Find a way to bring him back." "Don't worry, boss. I have asked people to salvage him. If there is no accident, he will be able to return to SHIELD soon." After a few words, both parties hung up the phone. Nick clenched his fists tightly and let out a long breath. This was the first good news he had heard since he took office. Although it was not certain whether it was true or not, it finally gave people a glimmer of hope. Time passed, and 3 days later, a huge block of ice was secretly transported to SHIELD. In the SHIELD research laboratory, under the research of scientists, the ice began to thaw and gradually revealed the figure in the ice. Nick stood outside the laboratory, watching nervously. If successful, SHIELD will have its first extraordinary combat power. As for whether Captain America will join SHIELD, Nick never worried about this. After all, people who know Captain America know that this guy is a pure patriot. As an official agency, as long as he invites him, Captain America will definitely not refuse. Soon, the ice in the laboratory thawed, and the exclamations of the researchers rang out one after another. "Incredible, this guy's vital signs are recovering. Oh my god, has he really been frozen for 70 years? Oh my god, he came back to life. This is simply a miracle." Under the exclamations of everyone, Captain America, who was originally lying on the experimental table, trembled his eyelids slightly and then slowly opened his eyes. Seeing this scene, Nick could no longer remain calm and walked directly into the laboratory. He wanted to contact Captain America as soon as possible. Compared with the boiling of SHIELD, Tony's villa seemed very quiet at this moment. On the dining table, Tony and Norman sat opposite each other, and food was placed on the table. Stark Industries successfully entered the OS group, so Tony naturally would not tie Norman up anymore, so Norman was considered to have regained his freedom. Norman ate the food on the table with big mouthfuls, and his face was filled with a sense of satisfaction. Although Tony did not abuse him during the days he was captured, he only ensured his survival needs. He thought that he could eat as much as he wanted, but he was just thinking too much. Therefore, after regaining his freedom, Norman first went to feed his stomach. After he was full, a satisfied look appeared on his face. "How is it? Is it okay?" Tony held the teacup, took a sip and smiled. Norman glanced at him, nodded, and then said, "Thank you for keeping your promise. If there is nothing else, I will leave first. I haven't shown up for so many days, and there are still many things waiting for me to deal with in the group." "No hurry." Tony waved his hand and interrupted Norman's words. "I have another thing I want to talk to you about. Anyway, it has been delayed for so many days, and it doesn't matter if it's one more or one less day." Hearing this, Norman, who was about to get up, hesitated for a moment and sat back in his seat. "Okay, I wonder if you have anything else to say. You know, this world is becoming more and more strange, and there are more and more extraordinary people like you and me. This is not good news for us. After all, the more extraordinary people there are, the less secure we are. For this reason, I formed an alliance where everyone gathers together to keep warm and rely on each other. How about it? Are you interested?" Looking at Tony's sincere smile, Norman's face looked a little strange. This guy himself is a huge trouble. It's good enough that he doesn't bring danger to others. He is also worried that others will find trouble with him. Who is so blind? In an instant, Norman judged that Tony didn't tell the truth, but he didn't refuse. Instead, he asked, what are the benefits of joining the alliance? Although he felt that Tony didn't tell the truth, Norman still agreed with his words. The world is becoming more and more dangerous, and it would be good to have someone to rely on. More importantly, Tony has become a major shareholder of the hostile group, and the relationship between the two has become extremely close. In this case, why not get closer, so that not only can you get your own safety, but also better protect the hostile group. As your own people, are you embarrassed to seize your own people's industry? Benefits? How about this? As Tony spoke, a thought came to his mind, and the Black Shadow Ninja suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. Seeing this, Norman's expression changed. What do you mean? He had always been beaten up by the Black Shadow Ninja, so he naturally knew how terrifying these people were. Join the alliance, you can get a part of their control, to help you do things. Tony smiled. Hearing this, Norman, who had been planning to be reserved, threw his previous thoughts behind his head. Deal. Ding, the Dark Alliance has added a new member, the Green Goblin Norman Osborn, and the reward has been issued. Hearing the prompt ringing in his mind, Tony's smile on his face became brighter. Congratulations on making a wise choice. Chapter 44, The Rabbit Spell and the Escaped Prisoner. After squeezing out the value from Norman, Tony gave him some control over the Shadow Core, and sent him away. Then he turned back to the room, and started the lottery. Although it was not the first time, every lottery made him inexplicably excited. The pointer kept turning, and mysterious patterns flashed in front of Tony's eyes one after another. Stop, he whispered in his heart, and the pointer on the roulette wheel slowed down at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon stopped. Suddenly, a well-behaved little rabbit appeared in front of Tony and instantly entered his mind. Suddenly, Tony's mind roared. Rabbits represent speed, which is the speed beyond light. With the power of the rabbit spell, the Flash is just a younger brother in front of Tony. Name, Tony Stark. Gender, male. Identity, heir to the Shadow Kingdom. Abilities, horse spell, dragon spell, sheep spell, rabbit spell, control of Shadow Ninja, control of Shadow Blade, control of Shadow Knight Bat, control of Shadow Troll. Number of draws, 0. Dark Alliance members, Spider-Man, Winter Soldier, Green Goblin. Looking at the new panel data, Tony raised a satisfied smile. At that moment, Tony's figure flashed, and the whole person disappeared in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already in the living room downstairs. And at this moment, he left the room for less than a second. After testing the power of the rabbit spell, Tony summoned the newly controlled troll army with a thought. Suddenly, a huge figure appeared in front of him, and each black shadow troll was 3 meters tall, like a small giant. If it were placed on the ancient battlefield, it would be a perfect weapon of war. Moreover, the defense of the black shadow troll is the highest among many black shadow core, and it is the best candidate for the front row of meat shields. Just as Tony was studying his new ability, a prison break was happening in New York prison. Flint Marco was embarrassedly shuttling through the sewers. He was still wearing prison clothes and looked exhausted. He found a hidden place in the sewer and stayed there for a long time. He didn't leave the sewer until it was dark. But when he walked out of the sewer, he found that he seemed to be lost. He was not in the city. All he could see was a piece of yellow sand. Suddenly, Flint was confused. In order to find the way home, he had to shuttle through the yellow sand and keep moving forward. But as time passed, he not only did not find a way to survive, but felt more and more uncomfortable. He was dizzy. At this moment, his feet softened, and he fell into a desert. The quicksand swallowed his body, which suddenly woke him up. He struggled violently, but the more he struggled, the faster his body fell. Soon, the quicksand completely submerged him. 10 kilometers away from him, a sign was hanging on the fence, military test field. It turned out that this was a test field for the military to test nuclear weapons, and this piece of desert was all caused by nuclear tests. He unexpectedly broke into the military test field from the sewer, a land of death full of nuclear radiation. After an unknown amount of time, when the moonlit night completely enveloped the earth, a hand stretched out from the desert. The sand kept surging, and Flint's figure slowly appeared. He looked at his hands in shock, his eyes full of disbelief. He thought he was dead, but he didn't expect that he was alive again, and he also had the ability to control sand. A burst of joy of surviving the disaster filled his heart, but he soon calmed down. Looking at the yellow sand around him, he no longer felt desperate, because this was his home. After spending a few hours, he left the military test field and returned to New York City. Hell's Kitchen, the slums. Flint, dressed in prison clothes, returned home under the cover of night. In the room, a pale little girl and a woman were sleeping. The two were pale and dressed in tattered clothes, and it can be seen that their lives were very difficult. Flint looked at the two with guilt in his eyes. He did not disturb them, but just sat on the sofa and felt the breath of home. At this time, a few papers on the table attracted his attention. He picked them up and soon, his body began to tremble. This was a physical report. The report showed that the owner of the report had leukemia and would not live long. And the owner of this report was his daughter. Suddenly, Flint's heart was like a bolt from the blue, and he sat on the sofa in a daze. Leukemia, a terrible disease, can only be treated by bone marrow transplant, and that requires a lot of money. But given the family's situation, it is obviously impossible to come up with so much money, and he is still a prisoner who escaped from prison, so it is even more impossible to come up with this money. Flint, who was already full of guilt for his daughter, now saw his daughter sick, and he was helpless, and his heart suddenly surged with intense pain. No, I must not let Ali get into trouble. Absolutely not. Flint muttered to himself with red eyes, looked at the room again, and he got up and left the house. At 8 o'clock in the morning, several money transporters stopped at the door of the US Reserve Bank. A large number of armed escorts guarded the road on both sides, isolating the outsiders. 300 meters away from the door of the US Reserve Bank, Flint, wearing a sweater, stared at the money transporter. As a fugitive, he couldn't make money through normal channels, and he didn't have time, so the fastest way to get money was to rob a bank. Before, even if he had the heart, he didn't have the courage, but after gaining the ability to control sand, he was no longer an ordinary person, and robbing a bank was no longer a delusion. Seeing the door of the money transporter open, the escort began to move boxes of banknotes into the bank, and he couldn't sit still anymore. Boom. A gust of wind blew, and he instantly turned into a sand giant and ran straight to the door of the bank. Before the escort could react, Flint controlled the sky full of sand and hit many escorts. But he didn't kill them, he just knocked them out. Then, he rolled up all the cash boxes with sand and disappeared quickly. When everyone reacted, they could only see a giant made of sand, about 3 or 4 meters tall, carrying the cash boxes and disappearing at the end of the street. Woo. The alarm sounded, and the whole bank was in chaos. That day, the New York Morning News reported the bank robbery in detail, which shocked the whole of New York. The US Police Department was immediately under tremendous pressure, especially the US Federal Reserve, which was backed by the government, and issued a death order directly, requiring the case to be solved as soon as possible and the lost money to be recovered. Chapter 45. You can turn your enemies into friends. A call came directly to Nick's office at SHIELD from the White House. Nick's face changed immediately after seeing the phone number. He quickly answered the phone and said respectfully, "Sir, what do you want to talk to me about? Have you seen the news this morning? What do you do at SHIELD? I'll give you 3 days to solve this problem for me." After that, the call was hung up. Nick, who was scolded, was stunned and had no idea what happened. He didn't stay stunned for too long. Nick immediately had someone send him a newspaper with morning news. As soon as he opened it, he saw the news that the US Federal Reserve was robbed. After carefully browsing all the news content, Nick cursed. "Fuck these bitches." The status of the US Federal Reserve is equivalent to the 4 major banks in China, controlling the economic lifeline of the entire country. Being robbed is a big deal, and all the pressure is concentrated on the US Police Department. But the US Police Department doesn't want to take this responsibility, so what can they do? They can only blame others. If it were a robbery by ordinary people, they would naturally have no way to blame others, but this incident involves extraordinary people. As a special agency for managing extraordinary people, SHIELD was inexplicably blamed. No wonder Nick was furious. After venting, Nick quickly calmed down. Although he was angry at the police department for shifting the blame, a strange extraordinary person appeared in New York. This matter deserves attention. SHIELD had just been punished not long ago. This matter must be handled as soon as possible, otherwise it will inevitably be labeled as incompetent. Who knows what kind of blame will happen at that time. After sorting out his thoughts, Nick quickly summoned the members of SHIELD to take action. The first thing is to investigate the identity of the robber. Although Flint has become a huge sandman, he still has a basic outline of his appearance. Through the comparison of federal big data, Flint's identity information was quickly found. It would definitely not be so easy for the US Police Department, but SHIELD's authority is much higher than that of the US Police Department, so what is very difficult for them can be done in one morning for SHIELD. With the identity information, things are much easier. SHIELD immediately checked Flint's recent records. It was found that he was actually a fugitive. SHIELD's criminal psychology experts speculated that escaped prisoners usually go home first, so SHIELD members rushed to Flint's home without stopping. In Hell's Kitchen, in the slums, black cars stopped one after another, and Nick led the crowd out of the car. This kind of thing didn't require him to do it personally, but for some special reason, he chose to go there in person. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door, and soon, a woman opened the door. Looking at Nick and others standing outside the door, the woman's face suddenly showed a nervous look. "Who are you?" Hearing this, the SHIELD member standing next to Nick was about to speak, but Nick raised his hand to stop them. "You wait for me outside the door. I can go in by myself." "Hello, ma'am. I'm a friend of your husband Flint. Is he at home?" Hearing this, the woman shook her head. "My husband has been arrested and is now in prison. If you want to find him, just go to the prison directly." After that, the woman wanted to close the door. After all, he was a woman facing a group of strong men, and his heart was naturally full of pressure. "Wait." Nick stretched out his hand to stop her. Then he took out a business card from his bosom. "This is my phone number. If your husband comes back, let him call me on this number. By the way, tell him that hiding is useless. Things have to be resolved after all. Even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about you." After that, Nick ignored the woman's puzzled face and turned around and left with his men. Back in the car started and left. Nick's assistant couldn't help but wonder, "Director, why don't we search it? Maybe we can find other clues." "No need, they probably don't know anything. Go back and wait for news." After that, Nick stopped talking. Although the assistant looked puzzled, he could only shut up. At first, Nick did want to arrest Flint as soon as possible, but then he changed his mind. He noticed that although Flint robbed, but did not kill, the escorts at the scene were just knocked unconscious. This gave him another idea: to recruit Flint. SHIELD already lacks the combat power of extraordinary people. Now that one has finally appeared, it is natural that he cannot be easily let go. Although this guy has a bad record, the fact that he didn't kill anyone means that he is not bad to the core. And he later found out that Flint's daughter had leukemia, so it was reasonable for such a person to rob. So, he didn't mind giving Flint a chance. In ancient Chinese, this is called recruiting, turning the enemy into one's own. And not long after the people from SHIELD left, Flint, wrapped in a sweater, appeared at the door of his house. He saw everything just now, and he almost couldn't help but rush out. Fortunately, the people from SHIELD did nothing, and didn't even enter the door, so he barely calmed down. Knock, knock. The door knocked again, and the woman opened the door, and looked at the figure outside the door, and her face was stunned. "Flint. You, why are you back? Come in quickly." After saying that, the woman pulled Flint into the room. Looking at the woman, Flint hugged her into his arms. "Vanessa, I'm sorry for making you suffer. I'm fine. Aren't you in prison? Why are you back? Someone came to see you just now. Are they from the government? Run quickly. They might come back at any time," Vanessa said with a worried look. Seeing her like this, Flint felt more guilty and immediately sorted out his emotions. Don't worry about me. Listen carefully to what I say next. At this point, Flint leaned close to Vanessa's ear and told her where he hid his money and asked her to take her daughter to see a doctor. After that, he asked what Nick had said to her. Vanessa didn't hide it either. She told everything exactly as it happened and took out the business card Nick gave her and handed it to Flint. I know. You don't have to worry about this matter. Leave it to me. My daughter's illness is in your hands. I can't stay here now. I'm leaving first. After that, Flint hugged Vanessa, hardened his heart, and turned to leave. Shuttled on the street, Flint kept playing with the business card in his hand. He didn't know Nick's identity, but he knew what Nick said made sense. Even if he could run away, what about his wife and daughter? This matter must be resolved, otherwise his wife and daughter would be implicated. Thinking of this, Flint finally made up his mind and called Nick. Chapter 46, Dr. Octopus's press conference. In Manhattan's Shield, a cafe, Nick sat in a corner by the window, waiting quietly. Soon, a figure wearing a sweatshirt with his face hidden under the sweatshirt walked into the cafe. Seeing him, Nick's mouth curled up a smile and raised his hand. Here. Hearing this, Flint cast his eyes over. After seeing Nick, he hesitated for a moment and walked over and sat opposite Nick. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nick Fury. Glad that you called me, Nick said with a smile on his face, showing great enthusiasm. Flint looked at him, pursed his lips, and said slowly, you should work for the government. Why do you want to see me? This is a question he has never figured out. After all, the two have no intersection. One is a policeman and the other is a gangster, but Nick said on the phone that he would help him. It's simple. Your ability makes you valuable. I've read your file. Although you have a bad record, you are still a good person among bad people. I can't bear to see a talent like you go astray, so I hope you can join us and work for the government. As long as you agree, I can help you destroy your previous files and let you raise your head and live in the sunshine again. Of course, you must return the money you robbed. Impossible. Flint's emotions instantly became excited. Nick, who had already checked all his information, was naturally not panicked when he saw this and still had a smile on his face. I know you need this money to save your daughter, but don't worry, as long as you join us, your daughter's illness will no longer be a problem. I will help her contact the right bone marrow and arrange the best hospital and doctor for surgery. What do you think? Hearing this, Flint's emotions calmed down immediately. He robbed the bank to treat his daughter's illness. If Nick can do what he promised, it's okay to return the money. But he was not a fool and said directly, I can promise you, but you have to help my daughter finish the operation first. Okay, no problem. Nick smiled and nodded. The two talked very smoothly. He recruited Flint with almost no effort. In fact, it was not surprising. When Flint made the call, the success rate of recruiting reached 99%. As long as it could help him solve his troubles, why would he not agree? Nick successfully recruited a superhuman, and Tony was attending a scientific conference at the moment. The initiator was Otto Gunnar Octavius. Of course, he also had an alias, Dr. Octopus. Coincidentally, Dr. Octopus's research project was invested by the OS Group. Stark Industries has now become the major shareholder of the OS Group. Tony naturally has to check the research projects of the OS Group. Therefore, he accidentally saw the research on the mechanical arm, so Tony attended this conference. Looking at Octavius, who was 80% similar to the movie, Tony listened to his speech seriously on the surface, but in fact he was thinking about how to bring him under his command. After all, Dr. Octopus's strength is still good. If we compare him with Peter, one Dr. Octopus can beat 3 little spiders. In the movie, if Dr. Octopus hadn't found his conscience in the end, Little Spider could have been beaten to death by him. But he was not in a hurry. Dr. Octopus is now a scientist of the OS Group, and as a major shareholder of the OS Group, Dr. Octopus belongs to his scientists. This duck that is already in the bowl, he can't let it fly away. However, in view of Dr. Reed's matter, Tony decided to wait and see before he successfully turned into Dr. Octopus. Otherwise the system would not recognize it, and it would be useless to accept it. After making up his mind, it was soon time for the mechanical arm display. A woman walked onto the stage. Looking at this woman, Tony narrowed his eyes. He didn't remember much of Marvel's memory, but he vaguely remembered that Dr. Octopus seemed to have started to transform because of the failure of the press conference. Is this woman going to be in trouble? He had a vague premonition in his heart, but he didn't mean to remind him at all. What he needs is the supervillain Dr. Octopus, not the scientist Octavius. Soon, 4 metal mechanical arms appeared in front of everyone, causing a burst of exclamations. Looking at everyone's expressions, Dr. Octopus was obviously very happy. He believed that tomorrow, his invention would be famous all over the world, and then he would be successful. Thinking in his heart, Dr. Octopus continued to show his research results. 4 mechanical arms were connected to the woman's back. The woman easily controlled the mechanical arms to move continuously, causing everyone to exclaim. But at this moment, an accident happened. The woman's face suddenly became ugly, and her originally rosy cheeks quickly turned pale. A scream came out of her mouth, and suddenly, her pupils became scattered, and her body completely drooped down. The sudden scene stunned everyone, and Dr. Octopus's expression changed instantly. "Sally, are you okay?" Dr. Octopus took off the mechanical arm, and kept shaking Sally's body. Soon he had to accept a sad fact, that she was dead. The people present looked at this scene and instantly exploded. Countless reporters quickly wrote and drew on their notebooks. Someone died at the press conference. Octavius developed a murder product. Soon, the scene fell into chaos, and countless reporters swarmed forward, wanting to interview the grief-stricken Dr. Octopus. Tony, standing at the end of the crowd, looked at the chaos and shook his head speechlessly. It was indeed an era of entertainment to death. When someone died, no one even called the police. Tony silently dialed the police number and left the chaotic press conference. He did not intervene in Dr. Octopus's experience, although it was very likely that he would take him down directly at this time to build a good impression. But as I said, he wanted the supervillain Dr. Octopus. And now it is obviously the beginning of his transformation, so Tony will naturally not intervene. Back in the car, Jarvis's voice suddenly rang. "Sir, the person you asked me to find has been found." "Oh, where is he?" Tony instantly became interested. He has been busy with Stark Industries during this period, but it does not mean that he has no concern for what happened in New York. He also saw the news about Flint and asked Jarvis to start searching immediately. But now, in terms of finding people, no one can compare with official agencies. Jarvis has no news until now. "Sir, I searched the entire NIO surveillance and found the person you mentioned. Just now, he met with Nick and joined SHIELD. Chapter 47. Men really become bad when they have money. Listening to Jarvis' words, Tony was stunned. What the hell? Sandman joined SHIELD. What a joke. He didn't expect that SHIELD would snatch people from him, and they snatched them. For a moment, he was full of depression. It seems that my appearance has finally started to change the plot. Thinking silently in his heart, Tony cleared away the depression in his heart. Although it was a bit uncomfortable to be intercepted, he knew that this was something that would happen sooner or later. After all, his intervention made the plot a mess, and changes were inevitable. But he didn't expect that Nick would have such a big courage to directly recruit a criminal. And SHIELD's recent actions are also unusual. They actually started to recruit extraordinary people. Although there is definitely a relationship between the increase in the number of extraordinary people, Tony doesn't believe that there is no component against him. The contradiction between himself and SHIELD is now irreconcilable. Although he holds Stark Industries, SHIELD dare not do anything to him. But there is a saying that the only thing that does not change in the world is that it is always changing. Now SHIELD doesn't dare to do anything to him. So what about in the future? When SHIELD becomes more and more powerful, can they still tolerate him? Now SHIELD recruiting extraordinary people is a signal that they are strengthening their own strength. It seems that I should find something for my friends to do. Muttering to himself, Tony drove to a bar according to Jarvis's navigation. Since getting 20 million yuan, Peter's life has completely changed. It's not enough to describe it as a night of revelry. The former good student and good boy has now become a frequent visitor to bars and nightclubs. He who had never even held a girl's hand has completely become a guy who changes women like changing clothes. When Tony came to the bar, Peter was hugging two girls and twisting his body on the dance floor. Looking at Peter's enchanting dance, Tony raised his eyebrows and smiled. It is indeed a true saying that men become bad when they have money. Look at Peter, he was such a good boy, but he still fell into the corruption of money. With a sigh in his heart, Tony walked into the dance floor and put one hand on Peter's shoulder to pull him out. Who? Peter shouted, turned around and punched behind him. Tony raised his hand and grabbed Peter's fist in his hand, and Tony's voice sounded at this moment. I haven't seen you for a few days, little Peter, you are getting braver. Hearing the voice, Peter's neck shrank and turned his head quickly. After seeing Tony, a flattering smile suddenly appeared on his face. Mr. Tony, why are you here? If there is anything, just call me directly to inform me. Why did you come here in person? Peter has a natural fear of Tony, especially after he has the control of part of the Black Shadow Core. This fear is even greater. Looking at Peter's expression, Tony let go of his hand and smiled. I have something to talk to you about. Come with me. After that, Tony took Peter out of the bar and got in the car. Sitting in the passenger seat, Peter asked in confusion, is there another mission, Mr. Tony? Yes and no, this matter is related to you. Hearing this, Peter looked confused, and Tony continued. SHIELD recently joined a man named Flint, who was imprisoned for robbery some time ago. At that time, he and his accomplices robbed a taxi driver, causing the driver's death. That driver, I think you should know, Ben Parker. At this point, Tony stopped, and Peter's eyes in the passenger seat had turned red. Everyone has regrets, and Peter's biggest regret is the death of his uncle. Because he stood by and watched, his uncle fell in a pool of blood. For this, he was full of self-blame every midnight. Fortunately, he personally sent the murderer to prison, which was the only comfort in his heart. But now he knew from Tony that there were two people who caused his uncle's death, and one of them was released from prison and joined SHIELD with a bright future. The anger that had been buried in his heart suddenly exploded. Where is he now? Peter said in a hoarse voice. He did not doubt the truth of Tony's words, but directly asked about the location of the murderer. Hearing this, Tony gave the location of the cafe. Peter got out of the car without saying a word and disappeared at the end of the street. Looking at his back, Tony raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. As the saying goes, if you don't use it for me, then I will destroy it. Since Tony knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. was destined to become his enemy, how could he watch S.H.I.E.L.D. grow stronger? So, he detonated the anger in Peter's heart and helped him cut off the claws of S.H.I.E.L.D. If it were the previous Peter, he might not kill people, even if he knew about this, but the current Peter is no longer the boy with pure ideals. In summary, he has matured and knows that only blood can bring revenge in the adult world. In the cafe, Nick and Flint, who had a good chat, walked out of the cafe together. Nick was happy to recruit a tough guy, and Flint was happy that his daughter's illness was cured. Both parties achieved what they wanted in their hearts, so they had satisfied smiles on their faces. However, just as the two of them walked out of the cafe, a black spot in the sky across from them quickly enlarged, and a figure fell from the sky and kicked Flint, who had just walked out of the cafe. Boom. The glass door of the cafe shattered. Flint's figure was blown away like a cannonball. Nick, who was standing aside, watched the scene with an expression on his face that was almost dull, and he didn't react at all. The extraordinary person he had just recruited was kicked away in front of him. Thinking stiffly, Nick turned his head and looked at the person who came. When he saw the person wearing a spider suit, Nick reacted immediately and said quickly, "Wait." He thought Peter was here to do justice. After all, this was his debut character. Although Peter's lingering in bars and nightclubs during this period made the world gradually forget him, as the director of SHIELD, Nick obviously would not forget him. However, Peter had no intention of stopping at all, completely ignoring Nick, and rushed into the cafe. Soon, a series of violent roars rang out in the cafe. The customers of the cafe ran out screaming. Nick looked at this scene with anxiety on his face. He wanted to stop the fight, but his strength was not bad compared to ordinary people, but far worse than that of extraordinary people, so he could do nothing but stare blankly. Not far away, Tony, who was sitting in the car, looked at Nick at the door of the cafe with a mocking smile on his face. Chapter 48, Conflict Escalates. Boom. Boom. The loud roars continued to sound. The cafe had become a mess under the inhuman battle between Peter and Flint. It can be imagined that the boss had fainted in the toilet. Suddenly, a series of black shadow ninjas emerged from the ground and appeared beside Flint. Before he could react, a long sword pierced his body. Puff! A series of interlaced sounds sounded, and Flint was pierced by thousands of swords, but the scene of blood flowing as Peter imagined did not appear. Instead, grains of sand slowly slid down Flint's body. Seeing this, Peter's pupils shrank instantly, and a trace of disbelief flashed in his eyes. Fuck, is this guy still a human? After cursing angrily, Peter rushed up again without any hesitation, and Flint also roared and transformed into a sandman at this moment, entering the physical state. Outside the cafe, Nick was originally watching the fight between the two with an anxious look on his face, but when he saw the black shadow ninja appear, Nick's face could not help but change instantly. Having suffered a great loss at the hands of the shadow ninja, he was too familiar with these guys. Originally, he thought that Peter was arresting him because of Flint's identity, but when the shadow ninja showed up, he suddenly realized that things were not that simple. No longer paying attention to the battlefield, Nick's eyes quickly looked around, searching for something. Soon, his eyes stopped on the sports car driven by Tony, and then he strode over. Dong dong dong. The car window was knocked heavily, accompanied by a burst of electric shock, and the window was lowered to reveal Tony's figure. Hello, Mr. Nick, long time no see. I forgot, you have become the director of SYNOPSIS. Now you should be called Director Nick. I wonder what you want to talk to me about, Director Nick? Tony said with an exaggerated smile, and the mockery on his face did not diminish at all. Nick stared at Tony's arrogant face and said seriously, what do you want to do? Flint has joined SYNOPSIS. You are now attacking public officials. I can arrest you at any time. Wow, I'm so scared. Tony pretended to be scared. But, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I'm a law-abiding citizen. How can Director Nick frame someone at will? It was Spider-Man who did it, not me. I just happened to pass by. Is it illegal to pass by? Tony asked with a sarcastic smile on his face. Nick was speechless immediately. Although he knew that what was happening at the moment was definitely related to Tony, he had no evidence. As long as Tony didn't admit it, he couldn't do anything to Tony. Of course, it would be feasible to let Peter identify Tony, but would Peter do that? Just think about it, and you know it's impossible. Okay, you force me to do this. Nick nodded heavily, took out his mobile phone in front of Tony and called SHIELD. Send someone to 3rd Avenue quickly. Catch the criminal, Spider-Man. As Nick said this, he looked at Tony and deliberately labeled Peter a criminal in front of him. It seemed to say, although I can't touch you, I can touch your men. Looking at this scene, Tony raised his eyebrows, then smiled, but didn't say a word. Soon, many elites of S.H.I.E.L.D. arrived, and Nick directly ordered, aim at Spider-Man and shoot. No matter the death or injury. After receiving the order, everyone acted quickly. Suddenly, gunshots rang out, and countless bullets whizzed towards the cafe. In the cafe, two people were fighting. Flint ignored these bullets. He had turned into a sandman, and was completely immune to the threat of bullets. In contrast, Peter couldn't do that. Although he was powerful, he was still within the scope of humans. He would die if he was hit in the vitals. So, facing countless bullets, he could only keep dodging. This dodge gave Flint an opportunity. Flint seized the opportunity when Peter dodged and punched Peter hard. Suddenly, Peter was smashed and flew out. The S.H.I.E.L.D. people outside also adjusted their guns at the first time, and countless bullets rushed straight to Peter. If nothing unexpected happened, Peter would be pierced by a large number of bullets in the next second. At that time, even if his strength was far superior to that of ordinary people, he would die. However, at this critical moment, huge black figures suddenly appeared in front of Peter, forming a human wall to block all external attacks. The whistling bullets shot into their bodies and got stuck in their muscles, unable to penetrate at all. The S.H.I.E.L.D. people looked at the black giant in front of them, and their expressions changed. Oh my god, what kind of monster is that? Everyone kept exclaiming, their eyes full of shock. But all this could not change the appearance of the Black Shadow trolls. Their number was increasing. except for some guards in front of Peter. The rest were stepping towards the shield people. Bang, bang, bang. A dull sound rang out, and the ground shook. The unparalleled defense of the shadow troll finally showed its ferocious fangs in front of the world. Firearms, the most advanced killing weapons in human civilization, were like fire sticks in front of the shadow troll. The bullets could not even penetrate the shadow troll's body. When the shadow troll rushed into the crowd, its huge palm easily crushed the elite of S.H.I.E.L.D. into meat patties. Such a horrible scene made everyone tremble in their hearts. Nick turned his head and looked in the direction of Tony instantly. His teeth clenched, and his face was full of anger. Although he had never seen the shadow troll, he knew that all this was Tony's work, but he was helpless. He knew it, but he could not do anything to Tony. Now there are two choices in front of him. Either retreat, unless Tony wants to go to war with S.H.I.E.L.D., otherwise he will definitely stop. Or grit your teeth and hold on, and find a way to deal with the shadow troll in front of you. It is definitely not possible to leave like this. Once retreating, the reputation of S.H.I.E.L.D. will be hit again, and it will also affect the evaluation of S.H.I.E.L.D. by the upper echelons of the United States. Secondly, it is not easy to recruit a superhuman. If you give up like this, who will dare to join S.H.I.E.L.D. in the future? Good guy. He was killed less than an hour after joining. S.H.I.E.L.D. can't even protect its own members. S.H.I.E.L.D. can't afford to lose this person, and Nick can't afford to lose this person even more. Therefore, the so-called Toads are destined to have only one from the beginning. With this thought, Nick gritted his teeth and said, "Request an Air Force strike, and blow up these sons of bitches for me." Nick gritted his teeth. His assistant heard the words and his expression suddenly changed. "Director, this is Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D. Do as I say," Nick yelled, and the assistant had no choice but to quickly contact the Air Force. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49. The good show is about to start. Whoosh, whoosh. A strong roar of helicopters resounded over the sky of Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D. Countless citizens looked up at the sky, speculating on what had happened. Tony, sitting in a sports car, listened to the noise coming from above his head and looked at Nick deeply. This guy's going to fight to the death with him. Thinking of this, Tony's mouth suddenly raised a cold smile. Since he wants to play, he will play big and see who can beat him. Today, he will break the backbone of S.H.I.E.L.D. and make them retreat when they see him. As he thought about it, Tony's mind moved with it. Suddenly, with Tony as a center, black figures continued to emerge on the buildings within a radius of 3 kilometers. They have wings on their backs and look like bats. They are the only flying soldiers in the Black Shadow Corps, the Black Shadow Night Bats. As the helicopter approached the battlefield, the already prepared Night Bat Corps soared into the sky one after another. Suddenly, the citizens of New York City saw a scene that they would never forget. The number of shadowy night bats seemed endless, directly covering the sky. The darkness enveloped 1/3 of the area of Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D., and the sun completely disappeared. Suddenly, countless people fell into panic, and some criminals took advantage of the darkness to commit crimes. Boom. Light waves came out from the palms of many shadowy night bats, and the 3 helicopters that had just approached Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D. exploded. The dazzling flames shone in the sky, and the wreckage of the helicopters turned into countless flames and fell to the ground. Many residential buildings suddenly caught fire. Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D., the political center of the United States, was in chaos. Since all this happened in an instant, when Nick reacted, Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D. was already in flames. Suddenly, his face became extremely pale, and panic finally appeared in his eyes. Things have become a big deal. If the situation was still controllable before, it has completely gotten out of control with the chaos in Manhattan S.H.I.E.L.D. This time, whether S.H.I.E.L.D. can solve this matter smoothly or not, it will be blamed. Nick's body swayed slightly, and his lips trembled a little. He overestimated himself and underestimated Tony. But at this point, he had no room to retreat. He couldn't suffer such a big loss and still couldn't save his own people. Then he would really lose both his wife and his army. Notify the military. Enter the city to kill the demons. Nick's voice exuded a chill. At this moment, his voice was like ice, which could freeze people. The assistant who followed him heard the words, trembled a little, nodded quickly, and quickly began to contact the military. Nick was not idle either, and took out his mobile phone, and made a call. "Captain, something happened, and I may need your help." On the other end of the phone, a muscular white man heard the words and nodded seriously. "I'll be there soon." After that, the man hung up the phone. On the battlefield, Nick breathed a sigh of relief. Captain America, a former legend, is also the trump card he has always kept. He didn't want to use this trump card unless it was absolutely necessary, but now he has no choice. Moreover, he wanted to try whether Captain America could solve Tony. Thinking of this, Nick took a deep look at Tony not far away. He knew that Tony was the source of the trouble. As long as Tony was solved, everything would be over. However, he had seen Tony's strength. Even the green fat man was almost beaten by him with one punch. As a result, he did not dare to let anyone target Tony, even though he knew that Tony was the source of the trouble. However, the appearance of Captain America gave him a little confidence. After all, he was a legend in the past. Could he take down Tony? Nick didn't know about this, but he was looking forward to it. And just when Nick hung up the phone, Tony's mouth corners couldn't help but curl up slightly in the sports car. The fusion of the sheep spell gave him the bug ability of telekinesis. In addition to being able to exert great power, telekinesis can also be used for eavesdropping. Unfortunately, as soon as the battle started, Tony's telekinesis enveloped the battlefield, so Nick's phone call was received by his ears without missing a word. It's really unexpected that Captain America has been resurrected. In this case, let's see whether your Captain America is stronger or my Winter Soldier is stronger. Tony's voice suddenly rang in the car with a smile. "Jarvis, pick me up Bucky." "Okay, sir." Soon, Bucky's voice rang in the car. "Boss, what's up? Come to 3rd Avenue in Manhattan Shield. Your old friend is coming." After the words fell, Bucky on the other end of the phone was confused, but since it was Tony's request, he naturally would not refuse. "Okay, boss, I'll be there soon." After the words fell, Bucky hung up the phone and went out quickly, and Captain America and S.H.I.E.L.D. also quickly rushed to 3rd Avenue. A few minutes passed, and at this moment, outside Manhattan Shield, an army entered the city. Tanks, artillery, helicopters. These human-killing machines were once again used by humans. And what greeted them was an overwhelming army of black shadows. Night bats flying in the sky, claw shadows running on the ground, trolls acting as meat shields, and ninjas hiding and assassinating. All 4 corps arrived, with Manhattan as the battlefield, versus the American soldiers. Boom. 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 The sound of more fierce artillery fire sounded, and the entire Manhattan was completely shrouded in gunpowder smoke. The citizens in other districts listened to the sound of artillery fire from the direction of Manhattan. What happened today? Is the United States going to fall? Why are there people firing artillery in the city? Countless people were full of doubts, and at the same time, a layer of shadow was cast in their hearts. In Manhattan, ordinary citizens had already hidden themselves. In addition to the soldiers of the military, the only people left on the street were the members of the Black Shadow Corps. The commander looked at the Black Shadow Corps in front of him, his face full of solemnity, but he still ordered, "Start the attack. Crush them for me." After the words fell, the infantry and tanks fought together, and the helicopters fired directly at the ground from high altitude. Rockets exploded and fell into the Black Shadow Corps, and explosions sounded instantly, and a large number of Black Shadow soldiers were directly torn apart by artillery fire. Even the trolls, who were known for their unparalleled defense, suffered heavy losses under the bombardment of artillery shells. However, before the military was happy, a steady stream of black gas soon gathered on the ground, and a large number of Black Shadow soldiers were reborn on the spot. Not only did the number of soldiers not decrease much due to the baptism of artillery fire, but it doubled. Such a scene instantly shocked the American soldiers on the opposite side. The excitement in their hearts was instantly extinguished by fear. While they were stunned, the reorganized Black Shadow army launched an attack. One after another, black shadows rushed into the crowd, just like wolves into a flock of sheep, setting off endless killings in the crowd. Chapter 50 Steve Bucky's Love and Hate. Ah. Screams rang out one after another. The American soldiers who were approached immediately became lambs to be slaughtered. They had no power to resist in the hands of the Black Shadow army. Claw Shadow and Black Shadow Ninja were responsible for dealing with the soldiers. Trolls took on tanks and armor alone, and Night Bats were responsible for dealing with all high-altitude helicopters. The tacit cooperation of the four legions immediately caused extremely serious casualties to the military. Helicopters exploded in the sky, forming gorgeous fireworks. The tanks, known as the King of Land Warfare, were like toys in the hands of the trolls, and were directly dismantled. The so-called elite soldiers became lambs without any resistance under the slaughter of Claw Shadow and the assassination of Black Shadow Ninja. Just one encounter, the military forces retreated across the board. This battlefield has completely become a veritable Shura field, and blood has stained the entire ground red. On the other side, in the cafe, Peter and Flint's battle is still going on, but at this moment, the two have been completely forgotten. Although the battle was caused by them, at this point, the two of them are no longer important. Now it has completely become another contest between Tony and Shield. Nick wants Tony to know that Shield is not made of clay, and Tony wants to completely break the backbone of Shield. Soon, a sound of motorcycles came from afar, and Captain America, wearing a US battlesuit, made a brilliant appearance. Holding a vibranium shield, wearing a mask on his face, and bulging muscles all over his body, all proved his strength. Looking at the person coming, Nick, who had been tense, was relieved in his heart, and immediately stepped forward and said, "Captain, you are finally here." Hearing this, Captain America nodded and said directly, "Where is the enemy?" Hearing this, Nick hesitated slightly and finally pointed to Tony. "He is a source of cholera this time. Kill him and the matter will be over." Hearing this, Captain America's eyes turned directly to Tony, and his eyes were immediately filled with murderous intent. Then he bowed slightly, and planned to launch an attack. But at this time, Tony got out of the car, raised his chin slightly, and looked at the Captain of the United States and said, "Why, after sleeping for 70 years, you plan to attack the son of your benefactor, as soon as you wake up?" As soon as these words came out, the action of the Captain of the United States was interrupted, and Nick's face changed instantly. At this time, he remembered one thing: the super serum injected by the Captain of the United States was developed by Tony's father. Therefore, it is not an exaggeration to say that he is the benefactor of the Captain of the United States. In this case, will the Captain of the United States still attack Tony? Thinking with an uncertain face, Nick quickly said, "Don't listen to his nonsense, just take action to deal with him," Nick urged, and Tony laughed immediately. "Why, the self-proclaimed righteous Captain of the United States is also going to repay kindness with enmity?" After the words fell, the Captain of the United States completely stopped his actions. "Who are you?" "Howard Stark is my father." Tony did not give his own name, but directly gave the name of his predecessor's father. Suddenly, the American captain's expression changed, and his brows furrowed. Howard was his old friend. When he was weak, it was because of Howard's help that he had the opportunity to inject the super serum. Even the equipment on his body was made by Howard himself. He didn't expect that the first battle after he woke up would be against the son of his benefactor. For a moment, the American captain was stunned and didn't move. This scene made Nick next to him anxious, and he had to shout, "Steve, look around you. All this is caused by the guy in front of you. Are you going to betray your beliefs?" This instantly awakened Steve from his memories. Looking at the scene of corpses all over the ground, the hesitation in his eyes was instantly swept away. "No matter whose son you are, you should abide by the law. The United States is a free country, but you will never be allowed to mess around." After saying that, Steve made an offensive gesture again. Looking at his appearance, Tony was not surprised, and everything was even expected. There are many superheroes in Marvel, but few have true faith. Steve happens to be one of them. In his heart, faith is the most important, and everything else has to stand aside. So Tony's words just now were not to build relationships, but more to test whether Steve is really as rumored. Now it seems that it is true. Of course, this does not prevent Tony from throwing some dirty water on him. TSK, you even don't let go of the son of your benefactor. You are really ungrateful. In Chinese terms, you are an ungrateful wolf. Listening to the ridicule, Steve's face did not change at all. Although he looks young, he is already an antique and will not be affected by the words of the outside world. However, not everyone thinks so. When Tony's voice fell, the eyes of the people in S.H.I.E.L.D. looking at Steve suddenly changed slightly. Before this, Steve's image in their hearts was very positive, comparable to a saint. But now, his image is slightly broken. Look, the legendary Captain America, who is said to be dedicated to the country and the people, even wants to kill the son of his benefactor. Such a change is silent and even seems useless, but you have to know that human heart is a very strange thing. A good person does good deeds all his life, but he does a bad thing and becomes a bad person who is unforgivable. A bad person does bad things all his life, but because he does a good thing, he will be considered a prodigal son. Steve's situation is similar to this. There is no harm in the short term, but it is hard to say in the future. Stop talking nonsense and follow me. Steve snorted coldly and rushed directly towards Tony. This time he did not hold back. Watching this scene, Tony's smile remained unchanged, and he stood there honestly without any movement. If Nick hadn't known Tony's background, he would have thought that he had given up struggling and was ready to surrender. Seeing that Steve was about to approach Tony, but at this moment, a figure appeared in front of Tony at a very fast speed and stopped Steve. Bang! A dull collision sounded, and Steve was immediately knocked back by the punch of the person who came. It's not that his strength is not as good as the newcomer, but he didn't expect the newcomer's sudden attack, so he temporarily withdrew some of his strength for defense. Steadying his body, Steve looked up at the newcomer, and suddenly, a familiar face came into his sight. In an instant, his pupils shrank, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Bucky. Bucky looked at Steve with a complicated expression and whispered, "Long time no see, Steve." After saying that, a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He didn't expect that the first task Tony gave him was to deal with an old friend. To be honest, if possible, he wanted to change his opponent. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.